Ready? Okay. Good morning, everyone. We're going to bring the Montgomery County Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, April 10th to order. Let the record show we do have a quorum in the room with myself, Dulcie, Nicole, Dan, and John. Jonathan is excused for today, and we're raising attendance by Bob online and Popek. With that, we will entertain any board comments. Any board comments from board members?
Just a quick one, Stephen. We got information, our articles. Thank you once again for the articles that you sent and going over conversations we had last month. The issue of housing, price of housing, the question of people's life choices because of the ability or inability to buy their first homes is profoundly impactful. So I know that we have the county is partnering or sponsoring the forum at the end of April. I think, regrettably, I'm out of town that day, but I think it's going to be an ongoing issue for us to consider in all the work we're doing. So I just wanted to make that and get into that. Thank you.
That's on April 29th, right?
Yeah, I'll share some details on that at the end of the discussion.
I spoken to Ed and Claire last week, I think it was. Or email back and forth with them, and he told me he was coming in town for that.
Yeah, he's one of our panels.
Yeah. Any other board comments? Seeing none, first order of business will be the approval of the minutes. Before us, we have our meeting minutes for our Wednesday, March 13th, 2024 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve? So it's been moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any comments or corrections to the board, to the meeting minutes?
I have a question. Did John Marley attend last month's meeting? I know I came late.
No.
No,
Okay. He's listed as staff.
yeah, I don't know how I did that, sorry. I looked back.
Added on.
But I think, well, yeah.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on the meeting minutes? To all those in favor of the amended meeting minutes as we just discussed. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any public comment or staff comment prior to us getting into our formal agenda? Any public comment in the room or online?
Did just admit one member of the public that recognized to make sure I might want to repeat that real quick.
Any comments from the public before we get started with our online? Anybody, Karina?
No.
And we'll move on to our first formal agenda item, which is our cross-county trail west update, and we'll call on Brian Olszack. Morning, Brian, how are you?
Morning, good. Hope everyone's doing well.
Everything?
Pretty good. It's been a while since I've been up here,
Yes.
so happy to be back. Yes, we'll be talking about our most recently accomplished or completed trail feasibility study. And I'll take you through the planning process, why we did it, where it led us to, and hopefully tell you a little bit about what's coming up next for the trail.
Second line, wait for the camera to come up. Great, do you see the front facing camera when you're in?
Not yet, it's not. So if you just put the presentation on it.
Yeah, let's just get the presentation on spine.
Not a problem.
Okay. Great. So
Get this away, Brian.
all right, so I figured I would start off with with just an overview, basically of our trail system. I don't know if how many of you look at this map that we have every day of the week, like I do, and us at the Trails and Open Space section? But this is,
I wake up and I was.
I figured, I didn't want to assume, but this is a map of our primary trail network. This is in the comprehensive plan, and this is basically our major policy map, you could say, for trails, for major multi-use trails in the county. And we're always adding this. There's 26 major trails on here. Those in red are those that are already developed, and those in orange are yet to be developed. But yes, this is our main highway map, you could say, of trails in the county. We don't develop or own them all, and don't plan to develop or own them all. But many of these are also planned or being developed by local municipalities, collectively or individually. And so we have chosen over a number of decades to focus on some of the major trunk trails, particularly in the east, and of course the Perkiomen Trail. But this just highlighted there is the full extent of the cross county trail overall, which is about 17 miles, which stretches from Conshohocken down there where it splits off from the Schuylkill River Trail, and to where it connects with our now existing Pennypack Trail in Bryn Athyn and Lower Moreland townships. So I'll take a little time just to zoom in a little more to this region here. First, I just wanted to explain that this is the second of two feasibility studies that we've recently done for the cross county trail overall. The first one we did was completed in 2022, and we call that the Cross County Trail East feasibility study, for the lack of a slicker term. And it's actually composes about 5.5 miles of future trail in the Upper Moreland, Lower Moreland, Bryn Athyn, and Upper Dublin areas. So what we're calling section C of that trail is actually currently being designed as we speak by Michael Baker International. And we started that about this time last year, actually. We kicked that off, and we hope to be finished design probably closer to the end of this year, with construction hopefully by the start, or not the start of, but sometime next year. And then sections A and B are in the pipeline, you could say, which again stretches from the end of section C, which is Davisville Road, where the YMCA is, the Willow Grove YMCA, and goes to the promenade in Upper Dublin, where actually an existing piece of the trail built by the developer of that shopping center already exists.
So wait, where's section C come off of the Pennypack Trail?
Right where so Mason's Mill Park is, Mason's Mill Road and Mason's Mill Park are in the general vicinity of that. It's close to where Byberry and Davisville come together. It splits off from what was formerly Creek Road, a public road, which then was vacated in the 80s, and which is now a trail that's owned by PERT, the Pennypack Trust. So it will split off from there. It's actually an existing trail that we will just improve and partially relocate further upland away from the creek. And we'll develop that through much of the Pennypack Trust's land and coming up to Davisville Road and crossing at the YMCA in Willow Grove. Sections A and B will actually be going through a lot of the commercial and industrial parks and areas of Upper Moreland. And it will actually be a very interesting, I guess, connection to hopefully a lot of commuting destinations. So we see that this trail sort of throughout as hopefully a major commuting trunk trail. Another section that's currently in design, well, actually the design is completed, which is something that Donna has been working on, which is the trail at Erdenheim Farm, which goes from Joshua Road to where it will pick up at the Wissahickon Green Ribbon Trail through the southern portions of Fort Washington State Park. And this is where our piece picks up. So actually it's two non-contiguous pieces of trail that have not yet been studied recently or at all. And we're calling this again the Cross Country Trail West. There's a north and a south segment, which I will dig into a little more. They are in mostly White Marsh Township, though partially in Plymouth in the south section here. Study area begins at Germantown Pike, where I will explain there has been work done to study a bridge, a multi-use trail bridge to go over the Germantown Pike street and the Plymouth Creek to then land us on the other side. And so we would hope to wind our way through there in the area of the Plymouth White Marsh School Complex, picking up where the Erdenheim Farm section will leave off at Joshua Road. The next section is what during the time of the study we called the north section, is actually trying to figure out how to jump off from the existing Wissahickon Green Ribbon Trail, which we also imagine that being also the Cross County Trail in a sense, because we'll just sort of pick up where that left off, which is around Skipback Pike, and we will go north to the area of the Fort Washington SEPTA station. So I'll go through a little bit more in detail, so don't worry if you haven't gotten all of that together. So as I mentioned, some of the past planning that has happened, the Cross County Trail again exists starting from Conshohocken up to Germantown Avenue or Pike, essentially. So some work has been done already to figure out how to continue the trail. Gilmore and Associates and Campbell Thomas and Company first did a feasibility study of how to put a trail bridge in this area where there is a lot of geological challenges there with karst formations and possible sinkholes and existing sinkholes that are the area is prone to. Also the sort of spaghetti network of utilities which are running along this corridor here. So they did a lot of work to figure out if trail bridge was even feasible. And we're also picking up where a previous feasibility study left off in 2015, which Plymouth Township actually took on themselves of the work that was done by Campbell Thomas as well. They were a sub on the project. The main consultant that we hired to help us with the project was NV5, which is a firm out of Philadelphia and New Jersey. So we had some idea of, again, how feasible this was, but our main goal here was to create a single preferred trail alignment for about 2.5 miles of trail split between these two sections, upon which to base future design and engineering. So the key goal of any feasibility study really is to figure out, of course, if it's feasible or not, or to find the fatal flaws of any potential alignment and also any low-hanging fruit of feasibility components such as available space or right-of-way where you could put a trail, whether there's any major environmental constraints that you should avoid before you start doing the engineering work. And figuring out if there are any existing gaps in mobility, if there are missing sidewalk networks, missing trail gaps. Also, just generally is there already a need that is already not being met when it comes to connectivity or just general connections in a community. Even though we're only creating a single trail with the Cross County Trail, we're hoping that it actually works as a bit of a spark to spur local connections to that trail from neighborhoods, from businesses or institutions. And so we're hoping that it will actually sort of snowball investment in trails in those areas. We're already seeing that is going to be a possibility in Upper Moreland, where we're doing the Cross County Trail East, that it will actually facilitate local connections that have already been planned. We're hoping the same will be happening in Cross County Trail West as well. And lastly, we hope to identify an intuitive route which makes sense to people trying to find a trail that is all inviting, comfortable, accessible, and equitable. And so through all this planning, we are adhering to an all ages and abilities design ethos. So basically that same facility or the same trail can be used by anyone from ages of 8 to 80 and everywhere in between. So that it's not particularly challenging, but it will be interesting to those people who want to use the trail, or even those who may not be conventionally familiar with trails. And we also want to stress that trails can be both recreation and transportation, and we see that this is as one of the main examples of trying to facilitate both a recreational experience as well as a commuting or just purely connectivity based activity as well. So just a quick summary of just the whole planning process that we did. It was about 1.5 years that it took to complete the work. We started in the summer of 2022, where we brought on NV5 and their planning team. They started the data collection process, finding out again about all of the environmental issues, the land use, the context, existing facilities, etc. And then we began in the fall to have our first of our 3 public meetings that we had both in person and then later online as well. The first meeting was just to listen to the community. There were no lines on the map or anything else like that. We were just there to hear people's ideas, where they wanted to go, where they couldn't go currently, and where they may want to in the future. So we assessed that feedback and determined some preliminary alignments, which I will show you briefly in a second. We had a second meeting to get some initial feedback based upon those lines on the map, which was some really great feedback. Later in the summer and the fall, we took that feedback again, sort of put it into the mix to figure out like, oh, well, what's going to be the facility that serves the most people in the best way, and that's the most sustainable way as well. And then we continued to connect and coordinate with our stakeholders, our local property owners, institutions, and municipalities, White Marsh and Plymouth, as well as regulatory agencies such as SEPTA and PennDOT, and the Turnpike Commission as well. And then lastly, in December of last year, we had our final meeting where we showed the public our sort of preferred alignments and then heard feedback from there.
Brian, do you have a sense of how many people came to, how many identical people came to all the meetings?
I do. Which just has to be the next slide here. So
It's like new.
what a team.
Yeah.
So we had over 200 people, individual people, individual unique people.
Yeah, okay.
Not just the same people, but individual unique individuals.
Just the minutes say individual people.
Talents. People who were either engaged via our online surveys. We had a couple of them. We also had an online interactive map where people could place various markers or indicators as to where an existing impediment existed in their walking or biking path, where they identified a destination that they always want to get to, that they currently do, or they again wish they could. And then we have had over 100 people who were engaged publicly, whether they were in our public meetings or in what we had on the trail or in the vicinity of the trails, which were pop-up little meetings, I guess you could say, where we stood out either on the Schuylkill and Cross County trails where they split off in Conshohocken, or actually in Fort Washington, and intercepted people to talk to them about the trail and the project overall. It was a little cold on that occasion, but I was surprised how many people we got just outside, trying to get sort of a good diversity and intersection of people doing different activities.
Back to my question, do you have a sense of how many people came to all 3 meetings?
All together?
Well, you said you had 100+ people engaged via public meetings or pop-ups. Do you know how many people stayed involved in all 3 of the meetings? All 3
Oh, throughout. Yeah,
November, March, and December.
Yeah, we had I would say there was a core group of, I would say maybe 30 people who were at all three meetings. A lot of them were from White Marsh specifically, though we had, again, a few from Plymouth as well. Actually, also a team from White Marsh actually were at 2 of our public meetings, and they actually produced some interesting short summary videos of the actual meeting as it was happening, and those were shown and are still being shown, I think, on the White Marsh TV. So that was an interesting thing.
You don't subscribe, should.
Yeah, I should. We also have a drone flyover video that we produced at the end of the project in the fall of 2023, which is surprisingly, I think it's the second most viewed video on our MCPC YouTube page. So over 1,000 views. So we did this also for the first time for our Cross Country Trail East feasibility study, and that was very successful. So we decided to do it again. And lastly, we have a project website, which we posted everything, recordings of the meetings or of the very last meeting, which was a virtual meeting, so we were able to record that, and linked all of the materials thus far produced. So overall, yes, so this is the main alignment of what we're calling the south segment here. Again, it starts at the Cross County Trail terminal or terminus at Germantown Pike, and then went its way through a number of public spaces. What was really great about this feasibility study versus the one that was done in 2015 is that 2 major public open spaces had not yet been acquired, the most significant of which being the Abolition Hall property, which was acquired recently by White Marsh. That really solidified how important this trail would be to connecting a lot of historic resources, and we'll see that in the north segment particularly as well. So essentially, we determined an alignment that would both go through some existing public open space, but also use an old disused rail right-of-way, which was offloaded by Conrail in the 80s. And luckily we don't have to work with an active railroad because we had to do that on their Cross County East. And then it will be a side path going along Flowertown Road, which of course, if you've ever been on Flowertown Road, you know that it's a pretty wide road. So we're gonna luckily actually use a lot of that by changing the curb line to then build a side path along Flowertown Road. Here's just a closer up view of that area. Again, we plan to spur off to a couple neighborhoods which are currently not accessible otherwise, unless you're driving to there. Keep going. We've also worked with the quarry, the Highway Materials Quarry, who are actually interested in working with us, which was great. So we'll go on the north side of Joshua Road here, or I'm sorry, the north side of Flowertown, and then to Joshua Road, at which point we will cross Joshua Road to then enter in the next phase, the Erdenheim Farm section, which again is fully designed presently.
You said what is fully designed?
It is. There's a few last minute I think agreements that are being worked out with the farm, with other entities, and then and yes, it should be able to go to construction, relatively soon. Knock on wood, of course. But
Hey, Brian,
yes.
is the majority of proposed trail designed to meet the standard, I guess, of this trail width and I know that in Lansdale, we've got some sections that need to go through a neighborhood, so we're kind of limited to the width of sidewalks and things like that. But the vast majority of what's proposed is all meets the 8-foot or 10-foot wide.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. Yes, so this will be a paved trail, very similar to other pieces of our county trail network. We figure that in this section, the more urbanized parts of the trail extent, it will be an asphalt type of trail, and we're essentially open to whether it be a cinder trail, very similar to the Pennypack Trail, or a full-on paved trail. Most of the existing cross country trail is paved asphalt, so it will be at least 10 to 12 feet. Yes, thank you. Good, it's a good point. So yes, just a quick summary. There's going to be connections to Abolition Hall. There will be a new trailhead that is developed in the vicinity of Abolition Hall, but on the next property over, which is called the Howell property. So you're looking southeast from this photo. So you're crossing Butler Pike at this area here. We'll have a rapid flashing beacon of some sort. There will be spurs to local neighborhoods, and then we're actually contemplating a full traffic signal on Joshua Road here because of the current speeds of the road. They don't necessarily qualify for just your typical rapid flashing beacon. So we'll be working with PennDOT to see whether a full traffic signal is warranted.
So the dotted line goes through Erdenheim Farm.
Yes, yeah, here's the KYW property, and then, yeah, the Erdenheim Farm is just over there.
And the hills on the other side.
Oh, yes, yeah, it's,
Down,
yeah,
okay,
it's down off the page, yes. So our north segment was interesting because the south segment lent itself to really a single alignment from the beginning. But the north segment, there was a bit more work that had to be done to figure out what are our best alignments. The conventional wisdom said that we would just use the Green Ribbon Trail, the existing Green Ribbon Trail, which is already on easements that we own. That Wissahickon Trails, the organization manages for us. And so it's maybe hard to see here, but there's a dotted line here that you can see is the existing Green Ribbon Trail, which is a dirt path. It's not wide enough to currently have bicycles or other types of users on that trail. So that was the first thing we considered was, why don't we just build up the Green Ribbon Trail? So when we worked with Wissahickon Trails and we talked with other people in the neighborhood, and we sort of considered the flooding implications that would have, we essentially thought that may not be the best thing to do. And so we had basically three alternatives. Two of them would use the existing public land that either we or the state currently own in the Fort Washington State Park area. And a third one, which went up Bethlehem Pike, which is in orange here, or yellow-orange, which took other things into consideration, particularly the historic pieces of this area, Pope Lodge, Fort Hill, part of Fort Washington State Park, and Clifton House up here. They were all challenging because Skipback Pike is a particularly challenging road to figure out how to cross. So when we looked closely enough to figure out the best route, we actually created sort of a little from column A and a little from column B. So we're going to cross at Militia Hill Road, or Militia Hill Road, create a new traffic signal there. It'll be a side path going over the Skipback Pike Bridge. We're going to use Mather's Lane, which is a very narrow road. And then we're going to come up Bethlehem Pike and sort of work our way under the Turnpike Bridge, where there's significant right-of-way, significant space. We don't need to build a new bridge or anything like that. And then work our way up to, again, Fort Hill, and then through parts of the state park that really aren't currently accessible. So when we worked with DCNR, who manages Fort Washington State Park, they were very excited because we were going to connect to places that weren't currently accessible at all to the park. And especially Hope Lodge, similarly, was very excited at the prospect of having a trail connection to their facility, because again, there really is no pedestrian or bicycle connections possible in that area. So even though it seems like we will have duplicative trails, the Green Ribbon Trail coming up here, then our cross county trail coming up here. They actually serve different purposes. One, it will be a fully accessible trail that accesses the parts on the east side of the Bethlehem Pike, and then the existing Green Ribbon Trail will continue to serve as a sort of more natural surface trail, a more and a different experience ultimately.
It's
as well.
really a footpath.
Exactly.
It's a footpath and it's so close to the creek in a lot of places. It's, you know, it's understandable why you have to be very careful of stormwater impacts. But
Exactly.
I think they should be considered a system together because that gives people, it's interesting, gives people options on what to do, and I think it'll bring more people to the trail.
Exactly. And actually, I think the best part is that with our crossing here, and going on the north side of Skipback Pike as a side path, you will now finally have a safe crossing of Skipback Pike for the Green Ribbon Trail where none existed previously. So it's sort of killing two birds with one stone, which we're very happy about. And again, some very quick summaries. The historic resources on this side of the street are very are now going to be entirely accessible where they previously were not. New traffic signal on Mitchell Hill Road, as I mentioned. What's also interesting is that we've been working, so you may not know this, but Mathers Mill was previously state-owned, but was disposed to a private individual who is now using it as their offices. But he is particularly conservation and historic preservation minded, and so we've been working with him to figure out how to adapt Mathers Lane for the trail, and so he's been very good to work with. His name's Ed Shin, if you ever met him. But ultimately, you know, we're very happy with the results. One thing I forgot to mention is that the trail will cross under a SEPTA bridge at Sandy Run. It's really hard to see on this map, but there is a bridge that comes under here, goes along the side here, and connects to our existing Cross County Trail on the north side of the SEPTA tracks at the Fort Washington Station. We went through a lot of iterations of trying to figure out how to bridge that gap, literally and figuratively, because at first we thought the SEPTA station was our connection point, but it proved that that would be truly infeasible, especially if we're going to disturb ADA access for 2 years in construction. So that was basically a no-go. Crossing at-grade was also not really a great possibility, but we found this basically ducking underneath an existing bridge, which has significant width that we can use. We may need to excavate a little to get the required height of it for a trail user under there, but overall, we think we can armor it to a point where it will be safe and efficient. So these are our preferred alternatives. So we've renamed these pieces for our project management going forward. The north segment we're calling the Bethlehem Pike segment of the Cross County Trail, and then the south being the Cross County Trail, Germantown Pike Bridge, and trail to Joshua Road. And as you can see here, there's going to be major regional connections that will be affected by the completion of this segment. We'll be able to get to Forbidden Drive from here, to the Schuylkill River Trail, of course, and then to further parts east, hopefully to the Gresham and the Tokenie Creek trails, which are still in development. Again, we have a project website, which was really great to post all the things that we had produced throughout the project. Definitely go over there if you would like to see our drone flyover video. It's only about 5 or 6 minutes, but it really gives you a good view of just what we're working with. And of course, you can also see other materials from our 3 public meetings, as well as our recording of the 3rd meeting, which was a Zoom meeting as well.
Is it flyover of both segments?
Yes, it is. Yes, definitely. And we hope to keep using some version of this website, or maybe a website on another platform to essentially keep the updates coming when it comes to developing the trail in the future. So the next steps, the engineering phases of both of these may start even as early as this year. I didn't know if Bill, not to put you on the spot, but I know we've selected a consultant to start design, but the design contract hasn't started yet. Is that right?
Right, we're in final negotiations with the top ranked firm to do that engineering work, and that should be finalized probably in May. And we hope to get underway with engineering of the bridge and that trail to Joshua starting in June.
And then the engineering phase of the Bethlehem Pike is still, I think we're thinking that we would consider starting later this year, but that would be through a separate planning and contracting process than the previous.
Where's the funding for the engineering?
Funding through the first one is actually with the help of the congressional earmark for specifically for the bridge that was done a couple years, or actually maybe just about a year ago or so. But there's enough to begin engineering on the bridge and the trail together, and the engineering for the Bethlehem Pike segment we imagine will be through county capital funds, unless we pursue a grant to help defray that.
And has there been funding put aside for the actual construction, or just hasn't gone that far?
That is in process as far
Yes,
as.
didn't we get what was the 2 million that we got through the federal grant? Didn't we get?
Yes, that was for the preliminary engineering
Right.
of the
Yeah.
bridge and the trail. Yeah.
And we had, and it's wonderful when these projects attract our legislative support. I mean, I think Congressman Dean was very excited about this, so that always helps us.
Definitely. But for construction, I'm not sure exactly at what stage they're at, but we actually, there is a full plan to get them all funded. Bill, again, I don't know if I want to put you on the spot.
I can quickly throw a number at this. So for all these different segments of the cross county trail, the bridge, the extension of Joshua, so that one pipe segment that Brian just mentioned, sections A, B, and C of cross county east that Brian talked about at the beginning, we're seeking about $34 million of funding for that, for construction only.
One source or all sources?
It'll probably be two sources, CMAC and the other is the carbon reduction program, which is a infrastructure bill funding.
Putting this on the tip is the other strategy to get those funds, which we've been working on with kids.
Once the trails are in place, who's responsible for maintenance?
That will be us and our parks departments. Yeah, Parks, Trails, and Historic Sites. So that's why it's always a sort of a heavy decision to sort of proceed with a feasibility study, because that sort of morally obligates us sort of down the road to then develop it and then to own it.
Was there a commitment has there been a commitment from the county policymakers to take on the additional mileage of trails and also the ongoing budget line item that would have to be added to, I assume, once you start to develop more trails? You know, you can't necessarily use the same staff. Is there a commitment? Has been a commitment to support that budget need?
Brian, I may step in here. With our capital budget, which goes to a 5-year plan, those numbers are put in for the ones that are in that 5-year horizon.
Yeah, but once it's developed, it's not a capital expenditure anymore. It's a maintenance, it's an operation cost. It's not a capital. cost anymore. So I'm asking on the operational side, is there a commitment to provide the operational funds to maintain and accept the trails?
So we have been involving parks staff like on the regional manager level in the actual design and the feasibility stages from the beginning now. So we have their buy-in early, at least at that staff level, rather than maybe higher levels. So that helps to build our case in the future where we're not just building something and it's like, hey guys, we just built this. Now this is for you, and they're not surprised by it, right? So I guess implicitly there is that support.
Brian, in years past, when we first jump started our trails program back in the 90s and then with the Perkiomen Trail, one of the things that was really impactful for policymakers at the county level was some polling and surveying that we did, which really supported and substantiated the public investment in these trails. It's a very powerful, let's say, incentive for policy, the people who really control our policy, to say, yes, people say this is where they want to see their tax dollars. And I don't think we've done that surveying recently. It was done generally. The county doesn't want to take that responsibility or the cost on, but nonprofits have done that. It would be great if the county had the resources and desire, but I find that those numbers really push people toward galvanizing the resources to maintain, like what you're saying, Stephen, this is what people want. This is a very concrete example of where your tax dollars are benefiting you. And it's visible, you can experience it, and it's bipartisan and cross-cultural, and I think it's something we should think about promoting in some way.
Sure, definitely. Yeah, I mean, in my experience, just of, even in my previous community planner experience, whenever you're doing a comp plan, what always rises to the top of like, what are your favorite things about this town and what do you want to see more of, is open space and trails, like almost universally. Agreed.
And the county is silent in many places. When I say silent, people don't make the connection of this is what the county does. When you ask people, the general public, you say, what is the responsibility of the county? What are the products? What do you benefit from? A lot of times they don't know. These are amenities and resources that people can connect with county government.
You have more for us, or?
No, that's it.
No.
I have a small question. In the historical sites, like the Abolition Hall, does the construction of the trail touches the historical site or respect the historical site?
So we'll definitely respect the historical site. With Abolition Hall specifically, we actually are sticking to just the side of the side of the property. We're connecting to an internal grass trail, but we were very we did talk to the township about how they wanted to address that, and through the design process we will have to go through a historic review on the state level, but our hope has always been that we will connect to this resource without adversely affecting it.
Then doesn't stop future archaeological excavation or research, obstruct anything of that?
I don't think it should. Actually, theoretically it's possible. We will probably have to do some sort of phase one review, like a phase one archaeological review. But you're right to think about that. Again, spatially, at least, we're staying as far away from the existing buildings as possible, but we think that we will probably have to go through some environmental review related to that so that we won't damage any underground resources, and hope to maybe find some potentially as well.
Yeah, because in certain moment, there has to be some archaeological research, and there has to be and there is obstruction and.
Yes, no, right, that would be problematic, so yeah, so we would, the review would happen before the full construction, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Brian before? Anybody online? Any questions for Brian? Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Next up is our Pottstown Metropolitan Regional Planning Commission update. Duo of Marley and Kim. Good morning. Good morning. Robert, can we leave the presentations up until everybody's finished with that?
Could you skip through, make sure that other slides aren't screwy, and let's go get a PDF of it. I'll be back.
Let's do that somewhere else.
like a PDF of it that we can get.
Yeah, I do. I need a thinner.
You can get into it as well.
Is it just the title that seems to be messed up, or is it?
Yeah,
It's showing the.
overlapping all the text on following slides, so I'll get started, but if you could help them find it.
Tim, if you wanna find it on the network, you're on the hub, and you can.
And then we'll swap it in, yeah.
And I can share from this.
So, anyway,
Oh, wait. Why don't we leave that up?
yeah, we'll start with the funny font and we'll swap it in. Anyway, so, yes, with Tim's help, we managed the Pottstown Metropolitan Regional Planning Committee, and they just renewed their planning assistance contract beginning of this year with a 3-year total pre-subsidized contract cost of $134,166. This is, of course, the largest of our regional planning assistance contracts, and actually the second largest of our planning assistance contracts overall, second only to Lansdale.
I do what I can.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
So here's the geography of the region. It's made up of 8 municipalities, 6 in Montgomery County, Douglas, New Hanover, Lower, Upper, and West Pottsgrove Townships, Pottstown Borough, as well as North Coventry and East Coventry Townships in Chester County. The largest of the regions in terms of the geographic area as well. And they, as a regional planning committee was established in 2005. But they have a longer history than that. They're previously a council of governments, so they've been working together for years. So this chart shows their total regional population going back to 1930. So 100 years ago, the Pottstown Borough was really the vast majority of the population of the region, the economic center, and the rest of the region was still very rural, but with highway expansion, population, housing development and population growth, it really took off in the mid-20th century. More recently, population growth has slowed. There was 7% population growth in 2010 to 2020, as opposed to 14% regional population growth in the 10 years prior. But the population change was not evenly distributed across the region. So the map on the right, I've overlaid the percent population change for each municipality. So relative to each municipality from 2010 to 2020. And of course, the largest population change growth was in New Hanover with 19% population growth in 2010 to 2020. But also major shifts in Upper Pottsgrove and the Coventrys. But just to put that in perspective, the region as a whole now has a population density of a little over 1,000 persons per square mile. Of course, the highest population density is still in Pottstown Borough. It's nearly 5,000 persons per square mile. But interestingly, despite New Hanover's really significant population growth recently, they are still the least dense municipality in the region at just 600 persons per square mile.
What's attributed to like the 19% growth? Is it just housing, or is there some attraction for the housing going in those locations?
Single family residential.
No, I'm saying-
And their
Let
plans,
me ask my question. Is it just housing, or is there something in that area that is attracting the housing built there?
I'd say that the factors that we anticipated continuing to be attractive to develop is that relatively affordable to develop. There's developable land and really quality school districts, open space, and that.
It's not like all of a sudden
Yeah.
there's some big job center or anything like that. It's just the affordability of the land and got it. Thank you.
A lot of people commute elsewhere, hop on the highway, and
Yeah, got it.
it's just their home base. Okay. So quick. Now,
Yes.
You might have to grab the,
definitely.
order.
Okay, this is for it. And they're preserving land.
Not that.
oh, thanks. Yeah, next slide. Right, so looking to the future for their population forecast into the future, DPRPC anticipates 18% total regional population growth by 2050, which is lower than their rate forecasted for 2040. I feel like a small decrease in average household size, which is a universal trend we're seeing, and the economic downturn in the late 2000s may have contributed to the region's population growth being less than that was predicted by the previous long-term forecast. But as we mentioned, we anticipate they're in rebound already because of all the factors mentioned, that they're an attractive place for development and for new housing. So, however, the anticipated population growth is not evenly spread across the region. That trend will continue. The forecasts predict the highest levels of growth to occur in New Hanover Township, with substantial increases also in Douglas, East Coventry, and Upper Pottsgrove. Pottstown and West Pottsgrove, which were both forecasted to lose population in the 2040 forecast, are now expected to grow slightly. Next slide. But in reality, East Coventry, Douglas, and Lower Pottsgrove are really where we're seeing active residential development taking place right now. Like, we'll be able to see population shifts in those municipalities in the next year or two. There's definitely continued development interest in New Hanover, but nothing that I've seen in the 7 years that I've been in the region get approval and start in the last 7 years. So that number is a little curious to me, as well as forecasted growth in North Coventry. 28% is surprising to me. They did their own municipal comprehensive plan a few years ago and identified a village center in the center of their township where there is some development potential, but nothing that would account for a 28% increase. Actually, based on annual population estimates from the census since 2020, North Coventry, Pottstown, and West Pottsgrove have all lost population. Nothing drastic, but nothing that's starting to indicate a major growth trend, especially for North Coventry in that number. So with many things, we'll have to take these forecasts with a grain of salt, and we'll be doing our own housing analysis in the comp plan update, which I'll talk about in a moment. Next.
Just a quick question, go back, if you could go back, the statistics at the bottom about the counties.
You need to
Yeah.
direct Scott to go back.
Thank you, Scott. The Montgomery County overall 10%, Chester County overall 22%, is that meaning that the municipalities here in the Pottstown region are representing 10% of the growth projected for Montgomery County?
Oh, no, I was comparing, like DPRPC's
DPR.
forecast overall, for Montgomery County and Chester County.
So the growth projections for Montgomery County in 2020 to 2050 is 10%,
Yes, the county.
22% for Chester County.
How many school districts does this represent?
Parts of 4.
That's what I was gonna say, that's.
Yeah, 2 and 2, the Pottstown Borough and Pottsgrove school districts, and then parts of Boyertown area and OJ Roberts. Well,
It's a big area, land mass wise. It's a big
Yeah.
area.
Next slide, Scott.
You can handle it, Scott.
down the line.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Sure. So just to go back to, the region functionally for a moment, their regional planning partnership, these 8 municipalities, have all adopted, regional comprehensive plan, first in 2005 and then updated in 2015. This is the 2015, the current future land use map. It shows how they've, decided to make a distinction between where they want to see growth and where they want to see conservation, rural character and agricultural land. Really on either spectrum here. So the Pottstown Borough is considered the regional core, where they want the most intense developments and the most diverse land uses. And they consider their along their highways and major corridors like High Street, their primary growth areas in pink. And then in yellow are their secondary growth areas, which really serve as a transition between primary growth and conservation. And the regional comp plan and intergovernmental agreement both lay out how the municipalities have committed to providing in their zoning for fair share housing allocations and regionally significant land uses, like they share mobile home parks and quarries, and landfills, things like that. So where they see a real benefit of working together. Next. The big project for the next 2 years at least will be updating their regional comprehensive plan. This time we are conducting a community survey. That was something they were interested in. That should be launching later this week. And I worked with Anastasia to create a logo and kind of brand this comp plan. They hope to use it to refresh their publications and letterhead and everything. So 2025 will also be their 20th anniversary of regional planning. We might make a little to do about that, we'll see. But so in the comp plan, we just kicked it off a couple of months ago and starting with baseline data analysis, of course. I gave a couple highlights of the population demographics, but we could just skip ahead to the next slide for a moment. I wanted to show the results of our existing land use analysis. So on the left is a distribution of land area that's used for each of these 16 land use categories in the 2015 comp plan, as opposed to today. So about 10 years of change here. And the changes are actually quite subtle. So there was development, but it appears to have been infill development and development of what was previously undeveloped land. So you can see like the biggest shift was an almost 6% decrease in what was categorized as undeveloped land. So that's where we saw the most development. There was only a 0.8% decrease in agricultural land in the last 10 years, which I see as a major win. The region is still, their land area is still 27% agriculture. And I think that was one of their major goals of working together to direct growth, was to preserve agricultural land and that character. So we're definitely seeing that in the last 10 years, that development is being directed to undeveloped land and in infill locations, and their agricultural land is being preserved.
So that undeveloped land, is that previously considered potential development land, or is it considered land that would have wanted to be preserved and not developed?
I'll be taking a closer look, but it's usually land that's not actively being farmed, at least.
Sought to be preserved.
It could be a combination of both usually in that category. And note, I don't know if you were gonna mention, but the public open space doubled, so maybe some of that undeveloped land became formally preserved or utilized.
Yeah, I think it could have been both. Yeah, thanks, Scott. As you mentioned, there was a 3% increase in overall in the region in public open space, with the biggest growth in that category in North Coventry, Upper Pottsgrove, and Lower Pottsgrove, where they were pursuing open space preservation, new parklands being developed. And there was also an increase of 364 acres, so less than 1% of the region, but still 364 acres of private open space. So getting land set aside through cluster type developments and preserved that way as well.
Marley, you had mentioned that you said like something like this time they're gonna be doing a community survey. Does that mean that there wasn't one done previously?
Correct, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting, okay.
In the interim, we did it for the initial plan. The second or first revision we didn't, and then we're doing it again now. 20 years later.
Thanks.
You could just flip back.
Over the back.
Yeah, back, I just wanted to mention about the comp plan, we'll be incorporating a new environmental sustainability chapter. So tying together some things that were in separate chapters and pieces before with natural resources, utilities, but adding in the regional greenways study and climate impact studies that we've done. So excited to highlight that further. And there are also some big topics that have been coming up in the region that we're hoping to use the comp plan to bring stakeholders and bring data and conversations around. And there'll be homeless shelters and affordable housing, the impacts of planned restoration of passenger rail to Pottstown Borough, the regional EMS needs. It's been a major topic. The sheer cost of providing fire and ambulance service in these rural areas has been a topic. Open space preservation, we're going to be celebrating the wins that we've seen in the last 10 years and looking at how to continue that. And also Pottstown Municipal Airport, which we might be talking a little bit about in the next presentation. That's a really unique asset in the region, and how can we ensure that's maintained and able to grow. So let's get 2 ahead. Thank you. So I also wanted to touch on DVRPC projects that are going on in the Pottstown region. Just through a long-standing set-aside in DVRPC's annual work program. They are always doing a transportation-related study for the Pottstown region each year. In 2023, they completed a 2-year study of Pottstown area rapid transit, of their enhancing their bus stops, really building off of PART's 2019 transit development plan and some service expansions they implemented after that, just generally supporting increased ridership and efficiency. Next, please. As part of this study, DVRPC conducted an online survey that got 84 respondents, not too bad considering. One of the first questions they asked was if they were currently a rider of PART or not, and it's just valuable to hear what current riders need to support to keep them as customers, and what would make non-riders more likely to ride. One question they asked was, what amenities would make riding PART more appealing to you? And it's just interesting, current riders really wanted the map and schedule at the bus stop, more information at the bus stop and shelters. Whereas non-riders indicated that they needed more information before they go out the door. They wanted online schedules and route information. And PART took a major step in that direction late last year. Now you can find PART's stop locations and schedules on Google Maps and plan out your trip that way. And I hope that is successful for them.
This part of the presentation we saw
Yeah.
at Meadowwood.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, the report is has both typology specific recommendations for bus stops as well as stop specific, and PART is now using this guide to determine how to spend $850,000 that they're allocated through carbon reduction program last year, specifically to begin implementing this study. So that's always exciting to see it off and running. Next. In 2023, after wrapping up the PART study, DVRPC started a one-year regional safe routes to school study. The study is looking at 6 schools in 6 different municipalities, at least 1 school in each of the 4 school districts we mentioned. Overall, the goal is to explore the potential for improving active transportation, kids being able to walk and bike to school, and just promoting safe connections to their local schools. So far, DVRPC has completed existing conditions report and outreach summary for each school. And now they'll wrapping this up with identifying the specific opportunities and recommendations and continuing outreach. Next. And once they wrap up that study, they'll be starting on a new project related to the Schuylkill River Passenger Rail Authority. As you know, SRPRA is leading a larger effort to restore passenger rail service through Pottstown out to Reading. So they're really understanding the larger rail network, working through the Federal Railroad Administration Corridor ID program. But the local municipalities with stations along the route are largely responsible for planning and development of passenger rail stations. All of these locations had passenger rail, but now we need to be about, are they suitable for passenger rail operations in the 21st century, and to build off of that. So we anticipate this being a 2-year study with 2 phases that may run simultaneously. In phase 1, DVRPC will use Amtrak's station planning development guidelines to assess the local rail infrastructure needs, develop conceptual plans and designs for the station area. So here's a photo of Pottstown Borough's existing historic station building, but we'll be looking at how much of that does it make sense to use, how does it interrelate with PART bus stop nearby and the Schuylkill River Trail, that. And in the second phase, DVRPC will be looking at the larger community, more from a community development, economic development perspective, developing a vision for the larger station area and identifying ways that the borough can leverage rail service and investment that will come from that to help the community achieve their goals. So let me now hand it over to Tim to talk about another important program that we manage for the region.
Thanks, Marley. This was a really good summary for me as well, because my role with PMRPC is very much focused on administering the mini grant program and working with the Pottstown Area Regional Recreation Committee. So just a quick update on the mini grant program. So we're now in the 5th round of funding. So far, we've funded about 48 projects by my count since 2013. And essentially we're funding park improvement projects and park planning projects. So over that 10-year, or I guess 11-year period, we've awarded over $880,000 in cash grants. We've also leveraged over $1 million in municipal matching funds that can be both cash matches and municipal in kind. So if Public Works or Parks departments are doing any labor. So with round 4, oh, and quickly, it's very important to note that this is a 50-50 partnership with the Pottstown Area Health and Wellness Foundation. So essentially, myself and Marley administer the program on behalf of the region, and then the Pottstown Health and Wellness Foundation provides the cash match for our DCNR C2P2 applications. So when we go in, say we ask for $100,000, they put in $100,000, and then we do all the administration. So kind of taking that off of their plate, so to speak. Let's see, so round 4 is about to end. We had a total of $150,000 in funding. It's a little bit less than we usually get, but we were able to use up just about all of that. There's one project that's complete. Pottstown Borough renovated their Spruce Street Park basketball courts. And then there are 5 other projects that are in various phases of closeout. They do need to close out by the end of this month, but a couple of the programs did get a extension. So that was 1 planning grant, 5 development grants, Ellis Woods Park in East Coventry Township, Douglas Park in Douglas Township, Schwenk Road Trailhead Development in Upper Pottsgrove, upgrades to Old Timers Field in West Pottsgrove, Pottstown Boroughs basketball courts, as I mentioned, and then Lower Pottsgrove is adding a pavilion and ADA parking facilities at Sanatoga Park. In round 5, which is just kicking off, the applications came in October. We did grant review in January of this year, and grant review involves Marley, myself, Health and Wellness Foundation staff, and then a couple DCNR regional reps as well. So I think we had about 11 reviewers. Basically, everybody goes in, scores all the applications. I take all that, present it to them, and then they do award allocation. Generally speaking, we have plenty of money, so we do pretty much give all of the money out that we get, and all applicants are generally funded. But generally, there's some requests that go along with that. So I'm tracking down, site plans and stuff like that. We did get $200,000 in funding this round. So again, we bumped up a little bit as opposed to round 4. And 7 projects included Riverside Park in North Coventry Township. They're actually adding, I think it's a board safe product to allow people with disabilities to mount into kayaks and canoes. So that's a really cool product. But of course, it's expensive. Hollenbeck Park planning in Upper Pottsgrove Township. They have a master plan and they're trying to develop, I believe, a mile trail there. Ringing Rocks Park in Lower Pottsgrove, ADA upgrades there as well, and kind of renovations generally speaking. Pottstown Borough, this one's a fun one. They're revamping their mini golf course, Manatawny Greens. So that I guess has been very successful. They do Halloween events there, that sort of thing. So they're very proud of that, and they're renovating all the greens. Douglas Park, I know y'all are gonna love this. They're putting in a pickleball court. And then Veterans Memorial Park in West Pottsgrove Township, there was a master plan that was funded previously, so they're going in and they're gonna add a basketball court, some pathways, that sort of thing. So with this application process, in round 5, we actually had over $500,000 in matching funds put up against this leveraged. I think a lot of that is Tricia McCloskey, the Pottstown Area Regional Recreation Committee planner. She's just really good about going and getting various funding sources and putting it all into one pot, stacking it up and getting a big project out of a bunch of small grants. And one thing that we really want to highlight is this ArcGIS experience. We do have to update it with this latest round now that we have contracts for round 5. But you can go in, look at all the previous rounds, see how much funding was awarded, look at a couple of pictures and brief description of all that. Next slide, please. So a big beneficiary of the regional mini grants program is the membership of the Pottstown Area Regional Recreation Committee. So this is kind of a spin-off of PMRPC. As of 2020, they split off and entered into an ICIA. But as you can see, they are missing New Hanover Township. They decided not to participate. There are municipal dues that you have to pay because you have to pay the planner. But there's all these townships and Pottstown Borough. And then recently they added Washington Townships, Berks County, because it is within the Pottstown Area Health and Wellness Foundation service area, not within PMRPC. So they are able to basically leverage that and use PAHWF funding because Park is pretty much propped up by them. Excuse me.
A lot of acronyms.
What was that?
A lot of acronyms.
Yeah, a lot of acronyms. Yeah, the ICIA for the PARC. Let's see. So they also became a 501c3. So now they have a separate arm that is a 501c3. So that basically allows them to go after certain grant programs themselves, whereas in the past, they kind of had to have a municipality go after it and then got a little funky. It also makes it easier to get donations from third parties, especially those people donating get some tax benefit from that now that they are 501c3. Lately, some of the biggest improvements that I've seen, they have a newsletter that they're sending out quarterly, I believe. There's blog postings, there's parks and open space, forget what they're calling it, maybe just a recreational calendar every quarter. So there's a spring one that came out recently, it had all the Easter egg hunts, all the concerts, park cleanups, that sort of thing that's coming up. And the kind of biggest spearheaded new program is annual park cleanups that started last year. So every member community within the park region, they're all kind of working together and getting just a little bit of funding from the Health and Wellness Foundation to get like snacks And then just each municipality is gonna have a specific work day over the spring and summer. I think some of them might coincide with other events, you know, like Trails Day, that sort of thing. But this has been really good and they did get a lot of good volunteerism last year. Let's see, and I mean, the biggest summary with Park is that they just always have tons and tons of grants being awarded. They're just pulling in tons of money every quarter. I go to the meetings monthly and there's always an update on how much funding they're getting, and it's really mind-boggling just how much improvements are going on in this region. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything for Park. The Chester County Planning Department also sends a planner to the monthly meetings as well. Steve Buck, he's a trails planner. So we just kind of give quick updates on our internal operations to them as well. You know, as grant programs come up, you know, Monco 2040, that sort of thing. So just kind of having a seat at the table with Park really helps, and just staying involved and, you know, knowing what's going on with all the parks and recreation. And that's all I got.
Question, I mean, this is a great model to take for other regional planning entities. Because I've for years been talking informally to the Upper Kirk Regional Planning Group, because they have so many amenities that planning together, utilizing joint resources would be great. So I hope you can do that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just that they have the Health and Wellness Foundation to provide that cash match.
Yeah.
If it weren't for that, I would say we should go for it with every region. And actually, there's a meeting with DCNR today to go over this program more broadly. So it's convening of all the mini grant, I guess, sub-grantees. So we're all meeting today and discussing kind of the status of the program.
How much does Health and Wellness put in every year to this?
So if we ask for $100,000, they put in $100,000. It's always
one entity?
For this one grant program, yeah.
Oh,
So
were you talking more about Park?
Yes, I'm talking.
Okay,
oh,
Park
yeah.
was, yes, also very much dependent on the Health and Wellness Foundation. That was really started through a circuit rider grant. from
Right, I remember,
DCNR.
sorry, DCNR circuit rider.
Yeah, so that's how they hired their first regional parks planner. But Health and Wellness Foundation put in the match for that also. And there was also a partnership with the community college and Schuylkill River Heritage Area. That's where the employee is housed, and like we pay them to do their paperwork and health insurance and everything. So there was a lot of MOUs and a lot of extra stuff that went into that. But we're so happy that even once the circuit rider grant was over, with Health and Wellness Foundation's help, they've now locally funded a full-time recreation planner and a part-time marketing assistant. They've created this nonprofit foundation to support it. So I think it's
Great model.
the park is
Really
seen
is.
as a statewide success story.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, especially because it started with that circuit rider grant. This is exactly what you'd want, a permanent
Yeah.
position that's just getting tons of money for these municipalities.
Thank you.
Any other questions from Marley or Tim? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to Marley.
Okay. I'm gonna go grab some water.
Yeah.
Okay, then.
All right. 247 review municipal survey. Morning, Patty.
Good morning. How are we all doing now?
All right.
Good, good. So, what's gonna come up in the next few minutes, is one of the initiatives in our work program. And, we'd had some conversations with the board over the past month or so about wanting to be a little more informed about some of our initiatives at the beginning, as opposed to just reporting at the end. So that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna talk about, it's a slightly different thing. It's not a planning contract, but it's one of our more internal things that we do. So think there's a slide before this. Thank you. Okay, yeah, so I'm sorry. So yeah, so this is the we call it the 247 review municipal survey. This is something we're going to be initiating over the next month or so, and hopefully the survey will go out in about a week to find out how we're doing and to make any changes with our municipal partners. And today I'm going to talk about it, as is Marley, But I also want to mention that the team working on this also includes Kevin Chavou and Aaron Feely. And I'll talk a little bit more about kind of why the team that we have together is important, because a lot of the projects we do here are teamwork, and it's good to recognize what each of those team members brings to the table. So if we can go, I can do the next slide, sorry. This is working for me. Yeah, here we go. Next slide. Yeah, hands off, guys. It's mine. So, okay, so the Act 247 review process, we call it that because it comes from a act that was called Act 247 from 1968 that was started in 1969. It is the municipalities planning code. And so I'm just gonna give you a little background. Many of you in this room know about it, but some of you may not. So it is a statewide enabling legislation. When it was put in place, it is what allows Pennsylvania municipalities to actually plan. They can do comprehensive plans, they can do zoning, they can do official maps, they can do subdivision land development ordinances, they can attempt to figure out how to do a curative amendment, but it all has to go back to this enabling legislation. And if you decide you want to do any of that planning work, you have to follow this. You can decide not to, and there are certainly municipalities then throughout Pennsylvania that decide not to, but if you want to, you have to follow what the MPC says. And there are several sections of the MPC that is required. So again, that language in there is if you have a land development, a subdivision, comprehensive plan in your municipality, you must submit it to, if there's a county agency, a county planning commission, you must submit it to them for review. So in that sense, it's a little bit why we're here. We do a lot of other things here, but this has often been called the meat and potatoes by our former director. She often talked about, Jody said that, because it's kind of why we're here in existence, and then allows us to do everything else we do. And these are some of the sections that refer to that. If you're going to do a land development subdivision, we review it under section 502. It says there, that's the section that says you have to send it to the county for review. 609 is about a zoning change or map amendment. 504 is about SADO amendments, and there's many more. That's kind of that. And you can see over the years, we have the statistics up there from 2020 up to 2023. We had 403 in 2020 that went up to 475 in 21, back down to 463 in 2022. And we had 333 in 2023. And I guess it's kind of an indication how some things have softened in our economy, even though it seems like things are booming, but that's the amount of reviews. And these letters that we do, that we call the 247 letters, include a couple different things. We might like comprehensive plan compliance, code compliance, and then just general planning recommendations. So again, why is that important? Why are these letters important to us? Again, the MPC requires that we do this. Now, I will say it's kind of I'm just gonna say sometimes state legislation is sort of interesting. It's required that we do it. It's not required that the municipality even look at it. Now, they're not supposed to have, they're supposed to give us 30 days, and they're supposed to wait 30 days before their governing body makes a decision. That's kind of what the law says. Now, that is kind of the only thing. If we take more than 30 days, they can say it without breaking the law. They do not have to open the letter and even look at it. And our letter actually goes to the planning commission, not to the governing body. So there's kind of a disconnect there. And we're just advisory. So even though they're making everybody send this in for our input, they don't have to listen to us. And so it's kind of, so then that becomes like, well, how do we handle that? Like, what is it that we should be doing in these letters? How do we handle our comments in these letters to actually be persuasive? Because that's really what it boils down to, is us trying to be more persuasive about what is good planning policy and why they should be maybe even following their own comprehensive plan, their own community goals. So it's highly visible, goes to all 62 municipalities. Nobody gets a free ride here. It's one of our ways of implementing our county comprehensive plan, as well as some of the municipal ones. It's big picture. We try to really point out what is good planning. You know, what is about this that is, sorry, my user was moved. What is it? What's the good planning process here that we're talking about? And so as we do that, we're thinking, well, we want to then embark on maybe finding out what our municipalities are thinking about it. You know, we've done this before, but we now want to think about, we want to send out another survey to understand how we can better serve them. And then maybe regularly update our codes and our processes. And just as a little quick preview, if you maybe didn't read our monthly newsletter, one of the new things that we just did is we introduced this interactive map. So you know, if you're wondering about, I wonder what's going on in my municipality, what are the recent projects that have gone on? We now have an interactive map where you can click in, find out when it was submitted, what it was about, what the plans are. You can even see if we've reviewed it yet, and if the review letter is there, you can read that. So this is going to be a really great tool. We're really excited about it. It is now live on our portal. But I would try to do that here, but I know how the how things work in this room, so I'm not gonna try to do that, but.
We're gonna do a quick demo at 11:20 on this.
Okay, very good. I'm glad that we're gonna do that, set you up for that. So, that is, one of the things I thought was really kind of interesting about this. So I am going to, but as we think about this, what is it that we, I'm missing a slide here. Hold on. In order. Well, I was going to give you a history on this, but I don't see the slide anymore. Let me just give you a little bit of history on this, because unless it's after Marley. No, I'm gonna give you a little bit of history on this. And without the map. I had a map here that showed our contract communities. And the contract communities, we have 34 contracts, and because of that, you know, other places do a little different. Even Chester County does this a little differently. They have a whole staff devoted just to do these reviews. And so they get very good at it. I would find that not very exciting, but they get very good at it, I'm sure. And so, and that's how it works for them. But for Montgomery County, we've always done a little differently. And because of our really robust community contract efforts with, you know, in Eric's section, we have 34 municipalities that have contracts with us. And we felt that the person that knows that contract, that community best, is that planner that goes there, can sit down in the meetings, go over the review letters with them, talk about why we said this, talk about why we're making this recommendation. So that was one of the things that we think really works well for us. So then that leaves 28 communities. And back years ago in the 80s, that all fell to design planning, which would have been my staff right now, which is Kevin, Barry, Aaron, and me. And we would have to do all reviews for all the rest of those communities. In the boom of the late 80s and 90s, that became just, it was impossible. That small group could not do it. And the lead of that design team at the time, Monica Drunani, some of you may know, she came up with the bright idea that, you know, there's a lot of other planners here that could do some of this. And it was kind of one of the thoughts that if you're a planner here at Montgomery County, you should understand kind of why we're here, what the municipality's planning code is about. You might be an environmental planner, you might be a transportation planner, you might be an open space planner, but you should understand what is the bread and butter of what we do. And so that's when that sort of happened, that it got spread among the rest of the planners. And so when you might hear us talk about contract community and non-contract community, that's kind of when that was distributed. And I think that that's one of the things that makes us a little different here. The other thing I think we do more than maybe some others, but I don't want to say outright that that's true, is that we also take that opportunity. Then that left more time for the design planners to be able to maybe do some redesigns. And we have been known to do that more often for our contract communities, but we've done it for some non-contract communities as well. And we'll reach out to the person that might be administrating, like Upper Providence recently, a couple of years ago, I reached out to the Jeff Grace there and said, hey, this is a terrible design. Do you want to see a different design? He goes, yeah, that'd be great if you did that, because the developer might actually do that. And actually the developer did look at our design and make some changes. So that's one of those opportunities we get to do that as well. And just as the last little bit, you'll often hear us talk about stamp and seal as the process goes through. Again, we get to review it, we make a recommendation, eventually it gets approved and it comes in for the reporting. That they have to come here first, because they our county wants to know that the system got closed, that we're following the rules, we're following the MPC, and that's the way to sort of kind of verify that that was reviewed by us at some point before it got recorded and became sort of, you know, the law of the land. So I am now going to send it off to Marley to talk about our last survey.
Yeah, so Pattie.
Sure.
So we're always want to understand that our letters are being helpful, and so it's in our work program to release a similar survey, but in our research, we remembered that in 2013, we did a municipal satisfaction survey. It got 67 responses. And one question asked, how does your municipality use the review letter, our 247 review letter? 83% said it was discussed at the planning commission meeting, which we think that's a great number. Of course, we'd love to see 100%, but that was positive. And only 53% said it was discussed at elected officials meetings. But that could be partially because it was discussed at the planning commission meeting. And also there was indications that it's discussed at the staff level and used in developing recommendations, conditions of approval, that sort of thing. So maybe it's not specifically gone through in detail at the elected official level, but it was positive to see that it was used in the process somewhere. Only 9% said it was not referenced or discussed at all. Of course, we'd love to see that at 0. So, yeah, they were all from the same municipality. And just to highlight a couple other questions from the last survey, we also asked how useful those letters were in making local decisions. 47% said always useful, which is positive, about half. 26% said often useful. So 73%, about 3/4 of people said it was often or always useful. 18% said occasionally useful. One respondent said it was never useful, and 8%, I'm not sure.
They have to be part of the 9%.
Yeah, that not sure, never useful. They're the ones that don't even open our emails. Yeah. So
That's come out at the end.
Wait.
So we're definitely thinking that these two questions would be good to try to recreate and be able to compare, see if all of the changes that Pattie's going to mention that we've implemented in the last 10 years have made our letters more useful to more municipalities. And especially curious to ask that quarter of respondents that were in the unsure or just occasionally useful category, really curious to poll them again and see that we've improved, hopefully. In terms of the content of the letters, which is something we're evaluating now, the 2013 survey asked what types of comments were most useful in our 247 letters, and there were questions that were based on the type of review. So for review letters for subdivisions and land developments, comments related to transportation issues, environmental issues, and compliance with municipal ordinances were considered most useful. Compliance with municipal ordinances surprised me a little, but we do have a lot of smaller municipalities without full-time zoning officers of their own that might appreciate that local knowledge and analysis. And in terms of our zoning map and zoning text amendment review letters, comments related to consistency with the municipal comprehensive plan, as well as offering model ordinance language and other resources like alternative zoning strategies, were deemed most useful.
Did you provide answers, like approvable answers, or were these things that they filled in?
Oh, this was multiple choice.
Was that?
It was multiple choice, so, yeah. So consistency with county comp plan was an option on both of these, and that was ranked the lowest, the least useful in both questions. But in 2013, the county comp plan was already 7+ years old, and it was very bulky compared to Monco 2040. I don't think it aged as well as Monco 2040, or wasn't embraced as well locally as Monco 2040 was. So again, it's something we'll be interested to ask again and see if county comp plan consistency has been brought more to the forefront in the last few years. So I'll hand it back to you, Pattie.
Great. So Marley, right, with this slide is a great lead into, so then what should we asking in the next one? And and then what changes have we made since 2013? So again, the changes that we've made since 2013, we now, and that's kind of backwards, but I'll go from one of the more recent ones. Well, the most recent thing is that interactive 247 map. That is something that's now out there for municipalities and anybody to be able to go out and the board as well to go and look to see what's happening. We did institute digital submissions, payment in the letter process, and that was in 2018, 19. And the other things is, one, we got those responses from the 2015 survey. The letter design was modernized. That's along that time is when we started commenting on consistency with the comprehensive plan and their own comprehensive plan. We kind of changed a little bit our wording from we support to recommend. We went to support from recommend. We support this particular project. We also now made it a little more easier for them to understand what they were looking at by attaching an aerial and the record plan, the top sheet of the project. So as you're looking at the letter, you didn't have to have back then pull out a whole big set of plans, and now you don't have to go on your laptop to figure out, gee, what did we submit? So I think all those changes on our part, we think we're good, but we want to hear from our communities whether that's been helpful, and that they find that useful. So as we go forward for this survey and future updates, again, we want to test those changes that we made, those ones I just mentioned. But we also want to get back some feedback more specifically on the 247. We also want to update our training for it, and then we want to sort of see if there's other technical tools that we can provide. And then we also kind of want to look to see how we can solve some common challenges through hoping to get somehow get the responses that will help us, like through that multiple choice process, like what are some of the comments that we're making? Are they helpful and are they not? And then also make them more aware of what our role and our resources are here. So I just want to go over a couple of the common topics, issues, and challenges that we have noticed recently in the last few years. And again, trying to see if our recommendations about them are useful to our communities. One of the things that is often used as a text amendment for zoning, again, it's a zoning alternative, it's a zoning change alternative. As planners, and if we're kind of like, we're sort of like dyed-in-the-wool planners, we're a little bit more like, well, you really should be changing you should be looking at it more holistically. We have projects come in where they do a small text change in a district, and we really will always point out, be sure, like it might be fine for this site, but be sure it's fine for the rest of the community. The top photo there is kind of one of those examples when, and again, when he started to come in, they aren't the only people that do this. They had a text change to allow in their, I forget what the zone was, but it was a commercial shopping center zone. The Walmart on this site had gone out a couple years before already. They saw the opportunity to put in a warehouse. They liked the idea that, let's make sure that this is being used. Again, I think municipalities sort of a rush to like make sure that everything gets developed and that something doesn't sit vacant for very long. So they allowed for this. And one of our comments was just make sure, look through the rest of your shopping center zone, make sure that there's not other places that this could happen, that maybe you don't want that, some unintended consequence. I don't think that has happened, but this particular site's not being used, is still not, is sitting vacant. So I will say that sometimes that rush to like do it the easy way without that thoughtful process of what your community goals are. But it's also the development pressures. They feel that pressure, do something right now. And one of the things we see now is the text amendments to put housing in the industrial districts. Again, a lot of communities have a lot of industrial district and maybe they don't want more warehouses, and that is starting to soften, but they do need more housing. And again, sometimes it's in a spot that's great. Sometimes it's in a spot that's not. And there was a community we were looking at recently where there is a townhouse development going in right across from a huge warehouse right across the street. So again, that's again, those thoughtful ways of looking at this. But again, we bring these up and we're not quite sure if our communities love hearing that from us or not. Sometimes there's a response to too much of a good thing. I'm calling that the lower project. I got this off of Google Maps. Those are two side-by-side nail salons in Hatboro Borough. And they have commented that they have way too many nail salons. And there are other communities that have noticed there's too many of the same service. And now we start seeing ordinances called dispersion ordinances. You cannot have the same thing within 500 feet of another one. Again, it's a reactionary thing, but and again, we're not saying it's the wrong thing, it's up to them to do it, but we think we will bring up the idea, like, is this the best way to modify what's happening in your community? And then historic preservation and other design standards, like people, sometimes they'll come in and it's too late for them to do something to save a property. Or the design standards, something will come in and we'll talk about the fact that, well, you know, your ordinance allows this, but if you had the right design standards for your townhouses, you wouldn't have, you know, stretches of 200 feet with no street trees in front of these buildings. And is there a way you can tweak those? And those comments we make are usually to the community, not really to the developer, because it's too late for the developer, but we make them to the community so that we're trying to make them aware that maybe this is something they want to examine. We're always apt to, and I'm really good for this. We're always apt to say, why do you need that waiver? There's a reason it's in the code. And it's usually, historically, it's been sidewalks, now it's often street trees, or even parking lot trees, or landscaping, whatever it may be. The thought is, if you need a waiver and that is often done too often, there's something wrong with your code. Same is true with zoning code. Now, we have to be a little more careful about not saying anything about a variance that might be requested. We can say one is needed. We really have to be careful not to weigh in on that. At the same time, we do weigh in on whether we think a waiver is appropriate, because we can look at it and say, you know, there's no reason for them not to put in the extra 10 street trees. They will fit. And then there's always that goes down to some of our comments still come back to that housing need about, you know, whether there's a way for affordable housing to be implemented in a community. So, anyway, that is some of the common things. So what we're trying to think about is then what are those solutions and what can we do? So, you know, we have gazillion model ordinances, guides, we have a lot out there. And I think most of them are pretty current. Most of them, I think, hit the target well. And so sometimes what we're trying to find out maybe through this is, are they, one of our questions back last time and will be this time, was how are they using our resources? Are they using our community guides? This is a sample from TOD where we're talking about the station typology, but but we have a lot of other guides out there. We're asking, how do you use those? And then how valuable are our comments about your comp plan? If 2013, it was the lowest one because our comp plan was so old, you know, our MACO 2040, our comment about compliance with our comp plan always has a qualifier with it. We don't say it complies with us. We are pretty diligent about saying, because you're putting development in an area that's already has the infrastructure, or this is going to be a way of being more sustainable, having sustainable communities. We try to put that in our language. Yes.
Is it possible to put a link in our comments that would go to the comp plan in the future?
Well, we put a lot of links in, Dulcie, but I guess we hadn't thought of putting the comp plan link in, and you're right. So, and then what we want,
you know, we're a long way from having that comp plan, but saying you should consider this, and they could click, because everybody's operating online much more intensely, that they could say, what is they talking about?
Right. And we could also make sure it goes to, like, again, when that becomes more of an interactive, probably web experience, we could do it where they clicks into right where that comment is embedded, not the whole big 200-page comp plan for them.
No. Yeah, it has to be specific and easy for people, and then it would be, you know, 2 minutes to look, not necessarily, you know, 15 minutes to find them.
Right. Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great suggestion. And then also with some of our language about consistency, is it helpful? Like, we will often talk about whenever there's underground stormwater management, it's all underground, there's always a comment about you need an operations and management plan to make sure that that gets inspected. It's much more apt to go wrong as opposed to an above ground basin, or you know, again, about complete streets and some of our other sidewalk improvements. So again, are our comments valuable and are they being used? Is it about planning education? So are our planning education things helpful? It seems like we're going to drift on this, but we're not, because in some of the conversations, and I'm not going to call you out, John, but I am, because one of the conversations we had with you, sorry, was like, who gets to see this letter? And then also, what do those local planning commissions feel they have the right to do and say? And Stephen can be an advocate for this now, because he now is a teacher for that course. There's a lot a local planning commission is allowed to do and say, even to a developer. And so is it that we need to really promote that more, find a better way for more of those groups that are in our municipalities to take those planning education courses? So they recognize they actually have the power to say, I like that what they said, the county said, and I think you can do this. And then make that recommendation to the governing body that really makes the final decision. And then as part of that, find out if our letters getting to the right audience or if our recommendations are getting to the right audience. So just going forward, the next steps, we're going to be sending this survey out to the municipalities. We're going to analyze those responses. We're going to revise whatever we need to on our templates and our processes. And then again, we'll be rolling out a new training manual for our staff to know exactly how they should be working on how they should approach these letters and put them together. So as I wrap this up and ask for some feedback, I just wanted to reiterate, this is a team working on this and it's kind of very deliberate. So because of all those non-compact communities, that's kind of one of my jobs, is to make sure all those letters get done and go out. And it's not just my group that does it, but it kind of falls to me to sort of like oversee that process. I make those assignments, who's the lucky person to do the community that needs a planner now. And the community planning section does the others, and Marley is one of the assistant managers as part of the team to be a part of this. She's one of those people that I think really, there's not that many people that just really love getting into writing these letters, and Marley's one of them. And I appreciate that about her because she really sees it as something that it can be so impactful, and it really can be. It's also with Kevin. Kevin has been here 20 years. Anyway, he's been doing reviews a lot. He's also done them for some other county, for Chester County. He also is one of those people that will question, are we still doing it the right way? Are we still doing it the best way? And he'll look to see what other groups are doing and bring that back to me on a pretty regular basis. Are we still doing it the right way? And so I feel that he is someone that can really bring a good voice to the table about that. And then Erin, assistant manager of design, she's been here 9 months. Okay. And you know what? That's the fresh set of eyes, making sure that we're not just so good about ourselves. Oh, we're doing this so great. Is there, somebody that can say, is this really the best way? Maybe we've done, I've done it in different places, but so again, that someone that hasn't been here so long that they drank the Kool-Aid, and that's why they're doing it. So that's this. I'm glad I won't have to do my next one because you're going to do this interactive map later, but
so if I could just add on, if there's anything that you didn't hear today or heard that you think we should ask about, that's really what we hope comes out. And if you think what you heard, addresses all the things that we want to seek input on, great. But you might have saw something like we should ask about that.
I have a question. I'm very interested to know who within the municipal organizational structure was surveyed in 2013. And has that changed at all with who you currently plan to survey? We talk about, you have your municipal managers and staff, you have your planning commission members, you have your elected officials, you have their consultants. There are a number of people that are a part of these land development reviews, and they're all likely to have different opinions and different levels of interaction with the letters that the county shares. And it would be very interesting to understand not only within the municipality, but their different arms. You may get different feedback.
That's actually a really good comment. What we do have on the survey, and correct me if I'm wrong, Marley, is it asks what your role is. And it might have asked I'm the engineer, or I'm the code enforcement, whatever. But we might want to think about broadening our reach on this to municipal engineers we know are working someplace, and other designers, because it would be good to hear from them, again, how useful they are and aren't. And I will say this in defense of that. Like when we come up with, major ideas of change, I'm really cognizant, having worked in the private sector as long as I did, not to ask for big changes when the project's fully engineered. It's spitting in the wind. Why would you do that? So for those projects that we feel like we didn't get to see it at the sketch plan stage, and this is fully engineered, we really try to pick the things that can maybe make a difference, that could be done with some small efforts without big expense as part of it. What we love to know, and one of our questions, I think, before and will be this time is, do you often send a sketch plan in and would you be willing to start doing that? Because that's when we can actually make some sort of like real design impactful change to what the project might look like.
Why not send survey to planning commission members?
We could do that. I mean, I'm not sure why we can't, as long as,
So, well.
yeah, well, let's, yeah.
I wouldn't,
Wait, I want to interrupt John.
I'll be really careful because I'm in a room full of planners, right? And I come to this with a planning. First of all, I think that sending the survey to every member of the planning commission, the planning department, and the municipal manager is going to be very helpful. Because that way, at least you have given everybody a chance to see the survey and comment if they choose to. If you send it to the municipal manager, it may see one person, and that person might be the administrative secretary.
Right.
And you're not gonna get anything. I think that a lot of the information that you receive is gonna be different for all of the different organizations that you serve. Meaning that my planning commission is Mike here. My planning commission is not engaged in any of this, regardless of how much information you send them. It's not what they do. It's not important to them. The letters that come out, the 247 reviews, it's an advisory, and they know that. So that can be put off to the side, and the planner for the community can read it at the end of an evening. And you, Mr. Developer, can take it for whatever grain of salt you want. Because we all know in this room that it is advisory and you're not compelled to do anything. So it gets put into the file and it's maybe reacted to, maybe it's not. Now, that's general. There might be some comments that are read into the record that are significant about like maybe ADA ramps or sidewalk connectivity, things like that. But generally a developer and that developer's consultant, the engineer or whatever, knows that this is an advisory piece. I would also consider sending a survey to the professional engineers who service these clients. And because they're the ones that have to respond to the letters. You know, what does that mean to you? In Lansdale, the elected officials never see the letter. Just because it doesn't happen. That is one more piece of information that they will not look at. And again, I say this out of all due respect for elected officials. I can't even get them to read my own meeting minutes, let alone a planning commission that they know is going to come in front of the board with a recommendation for approval from the planning commission. And that's what they hear. They don't know the backstory of all the different conversations about waivers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I don't know what the answer is. This is a really complicated issue if you're looking for really good positive feedback. I would like to think that every planning commission in the county is different, and that there are those that are much more engaged in what happens in the community. I can say that my planning commission is engaged in a project that's right in front of them right then and there. And let's approve it and let's move on. In terms of large regional planning for the borough and setting goals, it comes down to the individual ordinance. You know, I need a sign ordinance, or I have a vacancy ordinance, or downtown business ordinance. But it doesn't really extend to the context of the borough as a whole. I find that the review letters for ordinance change and saldo, those things are beneficial. The individual project that's trying to get approved from the developer, not so.
Interesting. Okay.
And again, I'm just trying to speak from my experience.
No, again.
And it's a
what we
little
need to
bit
hear.
different than most municipal managers because it comes from a background in planning. I can't speak for other municipal managers who knows what they do when they get there.
But it speaks to the importance, I think, of surveying different people within the organizational structure.
Yeah.
Because you'll at least get feedback to that level of specificity and understand where they're coming from. Versus just getting that type of input, not really knowing if that's throughout the organization or just in this one arm. And, trying to, kind of better understand it as a whole.
Well, I would suggest that if you do go out to surveying planning commission members, if they're not familiar with 247 or even that intimately involved in reading them, what John has said, by asking them to respond to a survey will actually
Educational.
give them some interest and say, well, it's great to ask you, what the heck is a 247?
Right,
No.
right, no, and I suspect we'll get a few of those.
Absolutely.
We'll get that. What is a 247 review?
Yeah, right.
You could follow up with educational opportunities or sort of like an advanced, like if people aren't, like, not everyone is gonna feel like they can bring like a knowledge base to the survey if they're new to the topic.
And reform the invitation that way, that you don't need to have advanced knowledge, you just need to be involved in the process, and if you're a planning commission member, you're already involved in the process.
And I don't wanna speak for Mike, but my guess would be that the 247 review is pretty much an afterthought in the approval process.
And it could be, and that could be, and again, I don't think in Lansdale we get to see sketch plans when they come in. It's pretty far along
Well,
project.
some of this is legislative anyway.
Exactly.
You can't change the impact of the 247 review letter because it is specifically written or specifically legislated as an advisory
It's an
and
advisory, yeah.
Hey, John.
a process.
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Hey,
So,
Did I miss, I hope I didn't put words in your mouth, but I was trying to help you feel where I'm sitting at my seat at the table.
right. Yeah, no, I feel like that was true for a long time, but I do feel like it's changed a bit in the last maybe year and a half, where they've increasingly where they've increasingly looked to me and said, okay, what about you? What do you think about this proposal? And they've given me ample chance to comment on it.
Excellent. Good. Thank you for that, Mike.
Sure.
Thanks, Mike.
Hey, Patty.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Bob Blue.
Hi, Bob. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. You talked about the waivers that are constantly requested from municipalities. And one that jumps up to me is that a lot of them, and this goes back at least to the 70s, where you have to show everything within 400 feet, 500 feet of the project. Unfortunately, we as engineers and surveyors don't have the right to go on somebody's property to locate these facilities. So, there ought to be something in the codes that it says, locate everything within 200 feet or provide a, detailed aerial photograph. So you could, maybe at 300 feet away from the site or 200 feet away from the site, there's a trash to steam plan or something like that, where it wouldn't be noticed if you just grant the waiver. So, I mean, we as designers, we probably 100 times, 100% of the time, we provide an aerial photograph, which would trigger conversations between a planning commission and or board of supervisors if they, look at it. So there's a lot of things in a lot of the subdivision land development ordinances that are antiquated, but nobody has the time or the money to address them.
Thank you, Bob, for that comment. I really appreciate that. That is, and as we are working on our new model Saldo and the plan requirements for the new model Saldo, that is something, and we might need to have a conversation with you and some of our other people that deal with this all the time to make sure we've kind of covered that as some of the things. And with the, it's so easy to use aerial photography right now as part of your submission. That's really what it's about. You just want to know what was nearby and next door. You really don't need every single building located precisely with the topography around it, which is, and it's also, you can't even do it like, you wouldn't even be able to do it and make money if you had to really do 400 feet around your property. So, but you're right, you don't have the right to go on there either. So, but thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
You're quite welcome.
The training programs that you run, that Stephen participates now in training, correct? I forget your acronym.
PMPEI, yes.
Okay. How expensive are they?
Not very. So we are one of the, we are one of the supporters of it. So we charge it just about $100.
$110 seat.
Okay.
And then $90 if you have a municipal contract.
Yeah.
With us.
Do you think that precludes new planning commission members from getting the training that helps on their decision making?
You know what, maybe that's a question we asked, because I don't know. My feeling is that, like, I mean, well, I'm sorry, I'm suspect for Lansdale, no, that wouldn't be a reason you couldn't send people to it.
We pay.
Yeah.
We pay for our members.
But we might have some smaller municipalities that could be a hardship. And,
The real problem is actually the planning commission members knowing that the classes are available.
Mm-hmm.
And whether the municipalities are providing them with that information, or does the county planning commission have the email access to send to those planning commission members or new planning commission members the ability to know that.
That could be something we also put out there, like if they're, they are an appointed public official, so they're there, they have so that doesn't mean that they could get an email saying, hey, we're doing this training, and then they can go to the manager or somebody, say, hey, I see this training for this, can I take it? Will you cover the cost? Because it could be just that never knew it was there, exactly. And Steve can attest to this, when we taught the community planning one last year, we had planning commission members going, we're allowed to do that? That's something we can do. And it's just eye-opening for some people that come to those classes.
Do they like the instructor? Or is the instructor?
Well,
There's a survey.
So we need to wrap up this.
Yeah, we did that poll at the end, and Stephen got all the X's and Matt and I got all 1 pluses. No, I will be honest with you, I've never had somebody say you were terrible. Thanks, Pattie. And I'm always surprised. I teach actually the zoning one more often, which, you think about it, I'm teaching zoning and, someone that, like, what? Like, how boring and dead dry is that? They come out of that saying, this was really interesting. I found out so many things, and we try to make it enjoyable. So yeah, I mean, we really get really good responses that say, this was great and I learned a lot. So that to me is a win if that's what we can get from them. So
Matt usually sings.
Right,
He
yeah.
usually does his like a music.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So.
Anyhow, we do need to move on.
Yeah.
Is there any other comments? If there's other things.
If you think of something in between, please just email me,
Yeah.
let me know, hey, I just thought of this, you should ask this, or try to find this out, or maybe try this approach. So, but thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Pattie.
So let's move on to the aviation policy plan, and Matt Popek, I think, is online.
I'm here too.
I saw your silhouette online earlier.
I was online, wanted to
Andrew Turner.
finish prepping everything for everyone here.
Andrew's a graduate of the community planning program.
Andrew is graduate of the PMPI program, that's correct. I think he's found it rather successful. So, good morning, everybody. We are here to present on the aviation policy plan. I know we are running a bit up against some time, so we're gonna attempt to make up some time in the air. Yeah, any aviation metaphor you want to use. Just to get going with this. So I'll be as concise as possible. Andrew has been responsible for a lot of the drafting of this plan and has a lot of information to share. So I'm going to try and talk as little and let him take as much of this as possible. But we have to start with some of the context. Why are we doing this here in the first place? As always, things come out of and flow back to our comprehensive plan, MONCO 2040. Hopefully you all knew that we did talk about aviation in MONCO 2040. This is the page where it was covered with terms of aviation issues here in the plan. And our one takeaway was to advocate for preservation of existing airports that provide commuter and freight services to businesses, with our measuring success amount as more dollar output from county airports. Well, we had 5 airports listed and a heliport as part of our county aviation map. We have since lost one, and Butter Valley Gulfport is basically at this point so small that it really doesn't get covered by any of the state or local aviation plans. So we're really continuing the decrease in aviation activity in this county. We're now down to basically 3 functioning airports. I'll get into that in a second. We're gonna run through basically the plan as it stands with each of the chapters. The best way to run through a plan and introduce it to you all, and it was provided last Friday as part of your board packet, is to go through exactly where we come from with this. There's an awful lot of the background data that just hasn't been part of any county documents over the last few years that we wanted to make sure we were updating, providing the most up-to-date information before getting into our own county's airport profiles, some of the opportunities that might be facing us as we go over the next couple of decades. And then we have a new blueprint for preserving the airports that we have. And I will be back at the end of this presentation to talk through the 12 specific policies and action items that we've come up with in this report. Just a brief overview on the introduction of this. The aviation sector in Montgomery County has declined over the past few decades, as I mentioned. Back in 1982, there were 13 airports operating in the county, and that was even down from some of the heights that we had earlier in the 60s and 70s. We've gone from 7 public and 6 private airports to basically 3 public and 1, you know, if you want to fly in for a round of golf at Butter Valley, you can, but there's very little aviation services available. However, they're still very important to the county's future. Between the sector jobs that are offered for training the next generation of pilots and mechanics, to travel access for business travelers and people that might live here and need to travel to other parts of the country, and any secondary business activity that comes up from each of these airports. They're important for us to keep. And sometimes we have presidents that happen to fly into Wings Field, as this picture from earlier this year shows. Now that we have our new comprehensive plan going on with Monco 2050, we wanted to make sure that we are adequately addressing all these aviation issues, especially with some of the new technologies that might be coming up to us. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to run through a good bit of amount of what we're going to be talking about, what's in the plan itself. Before I do that, the planning process that we've approached, hearing that the board wanted to hear more input about these plans and documents as they're getting developed. We've been working on this for the better part of a year. This was part of the 2023 work program. We kept it in the 2024 work program, know that we were concluding the efforts on it now. We've gone through interviewing airport representatives and aviation consultants and had a stakeholder meeting last year. The draft is finalized and in your hands. We actually have another stakeholder meeting scheduled for this Friday, where those airport representatives are coming back to tell us their comments and thoughts about what we're presenting them. Once we go through that additional draft review, we will take it upstairs to the commissioner's office to see what level of approval will be needed, and hopefully then it is published officially and one way or another included into Monco 2050. So I'll turn it over to Andrew for some discussion about where aviation stands here in the county. There you go.
Okay, so when we kind of started going through this plan, it kind of expanded and expanded. So I am going to go through this very quickly due to time, but there's a lot of background information. So perhaps we could come back next month and provide some more detail. The plan was in the packet as well, so there's a lot of detail in there. I'm sure as we go through this year, we're going to come up with a lot more questions. Okay, so as we're going through this kind of chapter to chapter very quickly, there's kind of 2 components to the airports in Montgomery County. They provide reliever status for these larger airports. Basically, this shifts commercial activity comes into the larger airports, and then private jets, private aircraft then are distributed through the reliever system. So basically, our airports reduce congestion at the larger airports. So as commercial airports expand, the reliever system also needs to be able to take that extra capacity. We have 3 airports public use airports left in Montgomery County: Wings Field, Heritage Fields, Pottstown Municipal. And beyond the reliever status that they provide, they also provide aeronautic functions. So medical flights, they provide a space for corporate jets, which also helps Montgomery County retain and bring in larger corporations for employment. It provides training and access for emergency preparedness, emergency response, and also obviously provides space for recreational flyers and pilots who own their own aircraft, and also provides job training for pilots and mechanics. So there is a framework for aviation system planning. There is the federal level, state level, regional level, and as Matt showed earlier on, we have the county level, which has been mainly the comprehensive plan up until now. Basically, at the federal level, all three of our airports are in that system that provides funding, grant funding eligibility. It's quite similar at the state level. The state also manages several grants. There is differentiation between classification from the federal level and the state level, which makes things a little confusing. But that is basically the level where the airports are at that are eligible for grant funding. At the regional system, it's slightly different. This is more, it was a DVRPC, so it's cross-state lines. Not only is it New Jersey and Pennsylvania, but also includes parts of Delaware and Maryland as well. And they also provide a regional aviation system plan. They provide, or used to provide, staffing for the Regional Aviation Committee, and they also do airport counts. The airport counts feed into the state and federal systems. They relate to classifications, which relates to grant funding. The Regional Aviation Committee is a really good platform for all of our airport stakeholders to get involved and meet every other month or quarterly, I think it was. And then the Regional Aviation System Plan provides policies for recommendations, which we are kind of feeding off of in this plan, and mainly relates to preservation, which is the main goal of this plan, and also airport hazard mitigation. So that's trying to basically mitigate land uses, conflicting land uses, height obstructions around the airports. There are all of our stakeholders have been very vocal about maintaining the regional aviation systems plan through DVRPC. So that is one of our recommendations as well. And essentially, as I said, because it crosses state boundaries, Philadelphia is the main airport. Montgomery County is a small part of the whole regional reliever system. It's very important to have a regional perspective with airport planning. So, as I said, we have three main public use airports. We're going to go through this pretty quickly. Wings Field, which is in Bluebell, is the largest airport by runway length, annual operations, and also economic output. Two of the main components of that are Penn Medicine, Penn Star, which obviously relates to the kind of meds and eds economic cluster in the Philadelphia area. They also have a non-profit called Angel Fly East, where they provide transportation for people that need to get around the country, I guess, quicker for medical emergency and medical procedures. Hangar development, in particular at Wings Field, is the main kind of goal for revenue self-sufficiency there. And as I said, it is one of the larger, or the larger airport in the county, although with regards to residential development in particular, is very constrained now on on how it can develop. As I said, hangars are kind of their main bread and butter with regards to bringing in revenue. Heritage Field is the second largest airport, although there are more aircraft based there. This is in a more commercial industrial kind of area off of Ridge Pike. So this has the most room for expansion. There is a potential room to expand the runway, and then also hangar development is an important aspect there. These figures, I should point out, are kind of Wingsfield provided more up-to-date information. Some of this information is from the State Bureau of Aviation. So some of the information is probably not accurate for today because of COVID-19, which had a huge impact on aviation in general, but also the airports in Montgomery County. And then finally, we have the third airport, which is a smaller or lower classification at the federal and state level. The big difference with Pottstown is it's a publicly owned public use airport. Heritage and Wings are privately owned. So being publicly owned essentially opens more doors for grant funding. If you're in the federal and state system, you're eligible for a certain amount of funding. If you're publicly owned, it opens doors to more funding. Again, these figures are to do with total economic impact. So this isn't to say there's 15 employees at Pottstown Municipal, it's just the impact from the economic development of the airport relates to 15 employees, which obviously includes employees at the borough because that's who owns the airport. So through the planning process, we basically highlighted some potential opportunities and challenges with regards to aviation in Montgomery County. Both state and federal projections are projecting increased demand in airport travel. This is mainly, again, at commercial airports, but there is a knock-on trickle-down effect to the smaller airports, particularly the 3 reliever airports in the county. There's technological advances. Unmanned aerial vehicles or drones are always kind of on the cusp of revolutionizing things. So we'll have to wait and see how that happens over the next wee while. Vertical takeoff and landings is just a kind of more air mobile system. So again, there's talk of potential taxis to and from the city. These all offer opportunities for airports to kind of to develop new economic strategies to accommodate these. They don't require as much space, they don't require the runway, but they do require maintenance, fueling, and maintenance and storage space as well. Diversified revenue streams and land uses, there's an opportunity there. When I think of this, I think of Heritage Field. It is a long ridge. They have quite an extensive land ownership. There could be potential development opportunities there, hospitality, retail. And then there's also technological advances in fueling. Obviously, aviation has an impact on the environment, and similar to automobiles, there are technological advances in electrification, is also as well as biofuels, more sustainable fueling systems. Obviously, new infrastructure for these would need to be incorporated into our airports. Challenges, workforce development. COVID ended up kind of pushing a lot of pilots and mechanics into retirement. So there is a kind of gap in qualified pilots and mechanics. Again, because the larger commercial airlines, airports kind of can offer more money, they pull in these pilots and mechanics, which then has another kind of negative trickle-down effect to the airports in the county and in the region. So there is a gap there to fill. Again, there's pilot schools, there's mechanic apprenticeships available at all 3 airports. So there's also opportunities there to develop workforce development. As alluded to before, although all 3 airports are in the system to be able to get grant opportunities, there is just not enough money to go around. There's large matches for the grants, both competitive, for competitive grants. This can put the put particularly the private owned airports off being able to apply for certain grants because they can't levy extra funds to pay for those matches. And then finally, obviously, there's the impact of climate change. As I said, there's, the aviation industry does contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. However, the impact of climate change, flooding, extreme heat, safety conditions for workers, this all affects the aviation industry as well, and potentially the airports in Montgomery County. So from discussions from our stakeholders, we basically adapted this blueprint for preserving Montgomery County's airports. It said there's preservation is the main key to airport success in Montgomery County, although there's these opportunities for technological advances. So securing that grant status, so maintaining the grant status within the state and federal system obviously is key to airport preservation. The Perkiomen Valley, which Matt said earlier, was the last airport to close in the county in 2021, did not have grant obligation status. We've got to anticipate economic issues. This relates to being able to provide revenue for any shortfalls in grant funding, also developing other opportunities to expand the economic portfolio of the airports, working with local governments on airport zoning and land use control. This is key to preservation. We want to be able to bring in the land use controls that allow safe approaches to the airports, provide the regulatory authority to be able to mitigate against obstructions. So this is basically making sure that the airport assimilates well within its geographic area, but also providing safety is a huge issue for preserving airports. Engaging the master planning process. So this is basically combining airport planning with community planning. So this can basically help maintain and develop relationships and partnerships with the municipality and the airports. And then also investing in physical infrastructure, making sure that hangars are all maintained, runways, asphalt, all of that material is maintained. The airports are functioning well and essentially can reach the capacity and the economic capacity that they can have with essentially the right amount of hangar space and also the length of runways, although Heritage Field is really the only one that has the ability to be able to extend that runway. I'm going to hand over to Matt now, a little longer, but
All right.
to go through our recommendations.
So now that we've seen how all this planning stuff fits together and how we have the blueprint out here, we have 12 specific policies and action items that have laid out. I'm going to run through them very quickly because we're already up against time. They fit into a couple of general categories. The first one is land use and zoning. As Andrew was talking about, airport hazard zoning is important to make sure that the infrastructure that we do have is usable. There are airports around the country where the runway length is effectively shortened because there's some tall building or tall tree in the way. We don't want that to happen. Most of our Western municipalities have this. Some of the ones around Wings do not. So we're going to try to make sure that the ones in the county that need that airport hazard zoning have it enforced. Secondly, facilitating the multi-municipal coordination over enforcement actions. Say something does for some reason happen that goes against the zoning. What do? We want to be playing that effective county facilitator role, trying to solve this sort of problem. We actually have something that's going on out in the western part of the county right now, and we do want to make sure that PennDOT is involved with these issues too, as the overall Bureau of Aviation authority that should be able to lead some of these discussions. Third, as Andrew mentioned, especially with Heritage Field, working with the municipalities to allow aviation areas to capitalize on their landowner status to diversify some of their revenue streams. It's hard to run an airport. A lot of them are more or less running on shoestrings. If they can get some additional revenue in to support the overall activity, that means we won't have to lose any more airports. Fourth, investigating land use controls and zoning for vertiports or other new aviation technology. If these vertical takeoff and landings or self-propelled battery electric vehicle airplanes all of a sudden become commercially viable, maybe we return to the 70s and 80s in the county where there's all sorts of aviation accessibility instead of just the airports that we have. You certainly won't need massive runways available, but maybe if there's access more into denser areas and a smaller footprint is needed, that could bring all sorts of new issues along. We're not there yet, but we want to make sure that it's on the ground because it very well could happen by 2050. Fifth, continue to encourage community engagement between the municipalities, airports, and the public. A lot of the times you just need that grassroots support to keep it going there and have the community understand what an asset it is that they have in the first place. Sixth in this category is encouraging pilot schools at the airports. Sometimes we've seen that there's weird pieces in zoning code where education isn't necessarily part of what's available in the land use there. We just want to make sure that it's all clear that it's okay to train the next generation of pilots. In the planning and policy category, number 7, assisting airports, as Andrew mentioned earlier, with those master planning and design efforts where they would like us to encourage environmental stewardship, noise management. We can either use our resources here at the MCPC or use our connections to make sure that we can recommend other firms that are experienced in this sort of work. Number 8, encourage aviation planning at the regional level. The Regional Aviation Committee is one of the first committees that I got involved with at DVRPC, and going to hear all of the different problems from the various airports was a very educational experience. DVRPC has put that on the back burner. We want to move it back to the front burner if at all possible. Number 9, trying to advocate to our elected officials for reforming requirements for the federal and state aviation grants. Things like lowering the mandatory 50% match requirement. Roads and highways, it's 20%. Transit and aviation, it's 50%. Is that fair? Hard to say. Probably not helpful for a lot of what our airports are doing these days. As Andrew mentioned, also trying to open the federal grants to the revenue producing opportunities and especially improving eligibility criteria for hangars. I think the biggest issue that we heard from all 3 airports was there is not enough hangar space. All 3 of them have wait lists for other airplanes that would like to live there full time. They're just don't have the money to build those hangars. Number 10, urging the county's workforce investment board to expand the mechanical training focus beyond, auto body shops and things like that. Planes need to get fixed. They're just as complicated, if not more so, than cars. Aviation jobs can really take you around the country as well. So if we can train the next generation of workers, there's all sorts of different ways that they could go once they're finished. And then our last 2 fall into the infrastructure category, advocating that our region funding the projects that strengthen those multimodal connections to the county's airports, whether it's for freight access, just general, commuting availability, whether it's in the form of TIP projects or planning efforts or any other grants that are available. Sometimes, the airports need that extra little boost of assistance in different avenues. So we wanted to put this in as a specific action item. And then the last one, just in general, for the airports themselves, helping them to apply for the grants to upgrade and improve their facilities and help to facilitate the discussions with the decision makers that might be responsible for some of these grants in the first place. So we've got a lot, came in a little over time, a little delayed, but not too bad. We're happy to take any feedback that the board has. As we said earlier, this plan is finishing up the final draft stage. If there's anything that you see here that we think we're missing, we're more than happy to take that sort of feedback. And we are meeting again on Friday with not just representatives from all 3 of the county's airports, but also PennDOT staff as well, and some of the larger consultants that have done a lot of work through the ages. They are excited that we're doing this plan, so I think we're on the right runway. We'll see how it ends up going, and hopefully this plan can go. Yeah, flying in the right direction.
So, questions from, no, good.
You noted education several times. Wouldn't it be, or could it be a possible link with Montgomery County Community College in Pottstown that's between the 2 airports, between these 2 airports to kind of investigate some educational opportunities?
I know we talked with Heritage specifically, and I think at one point they mentioned they had a cooperation and partnership with the community college. I forget where that went.
I believe so. With Heritage, there was a recent purchase, so it was kind of in flux a little bit, so the new management, the new owners kind of starting to push that, and it is I think it was with Montgomery County Community College and then also with some high schools. I think one of their goals is to break down barriers, because it's perceived that you can't become a pilot, and they're trying to break down barriers, and they have kind of school trips out and things like that as well.
What's the new technology often will interest, younger students, just not the traditional things that are associated, and you're saying there may be new technology. Right. Yeah. The other question real quickly is in Pottstown, I know the runway was constrained by the landfill. Am I correct?
The constraints that we heard were some trees and the road, I can't remember the name.
Yeah, there's a circle of progress on the eastern side.
But
Yeah.
right, I thought that there was the landfill, there was also an issue which is closed. I don't know.
It is closed now. Yeah, I don't know. if
Yeah,
that's-
would it change possibly allow them to have an increased runway?
Obstacles come and go with these sorts of airports. I think from Pottstown side, the municipal border basically hits right at the western edge of this. So you'd have to go into West Pottsgrove as part of the other issue. So Pottstown, since they are the operators of it, they've always said, if we were to expand, it would be potentially to the east and would involve basically clearing out the circle of progress areas, which is why it hasn't happened. So they are still able to, they can't fit all of the largest jets out at this particular runway, but they are still able to do, smaller turboprops and general aviation flights.
Thank you.
Do you have an idea what percentage is private people flying out of these airports as opposed to ones that are sort of flights that are being funded by businesses or health networks?
I thought I understand where you were going with your question, but then you did the comparison. I'm not sure. There is no more regularly scheduled passenger service in Montgomery County. Apparently, there used to be at Wings Field in the 90s, but then the Blue Bird got open and basically sucked away all of the demand for that. From what we've heard from a couple of the airports, most of their revenue, especially at Wings, is basically handling the jet takeoff and landings from a couple of very small corporate clients. I think all of them do some level of general aviation, flight school training, skydiving lessons, things like that. I don't know if anybody has specifically said how much is business travel versus general aviation flights.
Yeah, there's a lot of personal aircraft at these airports. I have neighbors and,
Right.
Individuals who either own or rent, portions of planes, that especially in Limerick and Pottstown. I know, I can't speak how much, but I know a lot of people that do that.
Percentage of personal travel as opposed to business and or some kind of corporate affiliation travel.
So I think the only thing that I could come up with on the fly at the moment would be, I think there's 107 base planes at Heritage. 2 of them are corporate jets, the rest are recreational flight. Yeah. And I believe that accounts for 90% of the revenue, those 2 jets.
Okay.
Years ago when they were closing Willow Grove, we had lots of presentations on the issue of emergency safety, making sure that we had regional airports. Did that come into play in any of the discussions or is that just going off?
I think we are pretty much saying since Willow Grove has been handed off to the Horsham Myriad crew, we're not anticipating that ever to be reactivated.
Oh, no, I just mean, but that issue being of concern,
Like emergency management.
Yes, awesome, thank you for putting it in consensus.
I don't recall it ever really coming through. I mean, Willow Grove is a massive runway and it's like, I don't know, I'm gonna make up something 5 feet thick, it was meant to handle.
The issue is really.
Yeah, military supplies. So in the event of a really big tragedy, emergency issue, that was a unique issue to Willow Grove because of the type of runway, the size, being a military installation. These 3 airports are nothing like that, so it never really came up because you couldn't really get like large scale supplies in and out of something like this. Those runways weren't built to handle that.
Do these 3 still have diners located in the pilot hobby? People like to fly from airport to airport and have dinner or whatever.
Right.
Do they still have this?
Wings has a restaurant. I've been there, it's still there.
Yeah, Wings is a country club, yeah.
Yeah, because it Wings has.
Yeah, and Heritage has, I think, a couple of things out on Ridge Pike. There's not a lot of food service inside the terminal. Yeah.
Pottstown does either, but
Pottstown
Cyclops
doesn't.
and Manatawny, there's stuff right immediately adjacent on the Circle of Progress.
Get back on your
I mean, I just wanna call attention, Scott, I think he has a good slide, but if you go back, Heritage has, if you go back to Wings, for instance, it's the biggest. You know, total output, 33.5 million.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Right, you know, in terms of other types of modes of transportation, I'm sure it's not lighting the oil on fire, that's the cost, Nicole, what, prepare to replace a large bridge, right?
Right.
That's it. But, you know, that's one of the points that our plan tries to make, that these are important parts of our economy. The combined output of all these is approaching 50 million, it's no slouch. And that's why we feel that this is important enough to invest in planning efforts, because as you saw, the comp plan said hardly anything about it. So we felt like we needed something that got more into these issues, accounted for the new technology, emerging changes, right? So we build upon Mako 2040 and we set things up for Mako 2050, which has the same thing.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Scott?
Yes. I want to introduce our newest staff member, David Greenberg, Senior County Planner and Section. And welcome. Let's introduce you.
Yeah, David Greenberg. Previously worked at Cherokee County, Georgia, and Metro Atlanta. Originally from Baltimore, and kind of want to be, you know, in more mid-Atlantic, Northeast area. Just more interested in the planning styles here and the architecture. What drew me to Montgomery County, so mostly in the county planning section, doing a lot of, hit the ground running with a lot of data research so far on the construction reports and the housing form coming up at the end of April, so making headway on that and it's really great to be here. I think I've met at least most of my the staff here, so the rest of you, it's very grateful to be here and look forward to contributing what I can and I'll see you in class.
David is filling that role of you know, specializing in data within the county planning section that has been vacant for too long. So look forward to that. And then we still have 4 open positions, the newest one being the principal graphic designer for communications. I think I mentioned last week that we lost Troy moved on. Staff service project is on Friday. We've done this now annually for 3 years. This will be the 3rd year running. The first 2 years we were doing a cleanup in Norristown's Riverfront Park. We changed it up this year. We're going out to Martha's Farm in Lower Providence to help with the community based agricultural work being done there that goes into some of our food share programs. And we have some great contacts there and looking forward to working with them. So got about 20 people signed up. Invitations are still open if anyone is interested, but actually right now we are flirting with the bad weather report and rain, so.
Rain or shine, we'll be inside.
Well, thunderstorm.
Well, that is
Rain or
inside.
shine. So also, I might put it on the agenda or save it for next month's director report. I do want to just give a quick update on the Erie Street Prison in Norristown. I presented on this topic at the Board of Commissioners last week. It received some coverage as an article, a good article from Rachel Ravina in your packet, bring up to speed. But the big news was that the county was withdrawing its demolition permit. We're not out of the woods, but it was not seen as necessary. It's going to be a long process throughout this year to get out an RFEI to developers for ideas. The really big news relevant to us is that planning is now kind of quarterbacking that effort. And while we unfortunately, I think, had no role in much of what occurred in 2023, much to my frustration, the administration and new commissioners are leaning on us now and hope we'll bring our expertise and effort to try to come to a solution because we'd like to see it preserved in some portions as well. So there's quite a bit more information on that, and so I'd like to maybe share that with you next month. Mako 2050, just also an update, the advisory committee list is confirmed with our commissioners. Those invitations should be going out this week, and a few of you will see those. And we look forward to getting that started ASAP in the next love to get it, acceptances, whatever, it may be maybe June when we have our actual first meeting.
Right into the summer when everybody's going on vacation. Right.
It'll be a 2-year effort, so there'll be lots of obstacles to overcome. But that's okay. And then the county, just as was mentioned earlier, the countywide housing affordability summit is on April 29th. As initiated by our county commissioners. We're on the planning team for that, as well as the Office of Housing and Communications. It is due to size of the venue and room, it is invitation only. We're targeting, our primary audience are municipal officials and decision makers, including also developers of affordable housing, as well as some of our nonprofit partners as well. And the invitation list or acceptance of the invitations are coming in quite a bit. So I think we won't be failing to get the right people in that room. Just to let you know, the format, it's essentially 8:30 to 1 p.m. event. With commissioners speaking, Valor Kush will be returning as representing the Commonwealth in an update of what's happening at the state level. We have a keynote speaker who we're very anxious to see and heard great things about, Gary Gilliam from the Bridge Eco Village. And then the breakout sessions where we'll be getting into panel discussions with the attendees as well. Essentially, there are 6 spread across 2 time slots. So people will be able to choose which ones they go to. And there'll be panels within each one of those. 3 of them are focused on the homelessness situation in various capacities, including one that really goes into some guests from Houston who have addressed this area in some innovative ways. And then 3 of them are more of the affordability side. And Ann Levitt-Gruberger is hard at work on.
When is that?
These are April 29th. If you are interested in coming and did not, for some reason, receive the initial invitation blast, let me know. We'll certainly get you on. Those 3 breakouts dealing with affordability include a roundtable on partnering with developers, zoning practices and regulatory tools, with a few municipal representatives, and legislative solutions. Update on what's happening at the state level and potential there. We're working with the commissioners on some potential announcements accompanying with this event. So I don't want to be in front of that at this public meeting. But we expect a few things and a few things that will influence our work. So we will be talking about that going forward. One thing I'll touch on is one idea that we're looking forward to is creating a program for more voluntary housing audits in communities to give them the information they need to address it. We know there are townships that are more proactive on this and more supportive of finding solutions than others. That's just the way it is. Those who are ready and willing, we want to be there to help them. And that's kind of the purpose of initiating that promptly. In addition to that, more resources, more data, countywide needs assessment. Those are the other things that I think we will be jumping on from this. Moving on, there's a lot going on the events calendar. I'll be busy the next month, and some of my colleagues here at the Planning Commission. Next week, I'll be speaking to it on a ULI panel on inclusionary zoning and opportunities. It's going to be centered in downtown Philadelphia in the regional, but they wanted a county representative, which I'm filling that role. So I'm looking forward to that. On the 25th of April, Pattie and I will be going out to a dinner meeting with the Montgomery County Boroughs Association at the Pennypack Community Center. They requested an update on what the county's up doing, what the Planning Commission doing, programs and resources and that kind of thing. So we're happy to go out and talk to them, promote our work. I mentioned the Housing Summit, and then an event which and all of our board members are welcome if you're interested to attend. A celebration of Camp Laughing Waters in Gilbertsville.
It's changed.
And this is on May 3rd. It was previously scheduled earlier, but the current date is May 3rd from 1 to 3 p.m. We just learned yesterday there was a county commissioner conflict with something that day. I don't think it's going to change, but they may not be able to attend now. So if anybody here wants to come, we'll certainly.
I'm going, I'm registered.
Great.
Open to, yeah.
So if that does change, if it changes at all, I will send a note to this whole board, just because I know there is interest. And you don't want to be left out of that. And then I think we're at the end, so I'm going to just jump online real quick. We're still here. I'm gonna share my screen. And you're gonna get the super short version, but this is something you can explore on your own, and I hope you do, because I'm real excited that it's a very useful tool to everyone, to staff, to residents, to official municipal representatives. So this is a subdivision and land development reviews map. When you come onto it, there's a splash page that gives you some instructions, but you can also access those on more information. Just kind of explains the data that's here and some links to other things that people are interested in. When you open it up though, what you see are parcels, lots from since 2008, all of the proposals that have been submitted to the county. We started our digital effort in 2018, but we also scanned and backtracked 10 years prior to make sure all that information could be available for essentially this moment, as well as how we use it internally for staff. When you click on a parcel, and you can zoom in and out real easily, when you click on one, you'll get some basic information. It's in the format of our database, so some may be more intuitive than others, and depending on how familiar you are with this type of data, but you know, it's there. It's hopefully not too cryptic. But what's really key, what's really innovative here is the view documents button on each of these. This takes you to something that our IT department developed for us. Every file that is in that digital file associated with the development is now accessible to anyone using this system, including the plan itself, the review letter that we wrote, and it's not filtered. So sometimes and municipalities and developers are the ones to submit these documents. So it's not unusual that there's one that might have 12 documents. They might give us the whole kitchen sink. Others don't give us that much, and just what they're required. So we do categorize them with the document type button thing, just to make it a little bit understandable. But the document names may be cryptic. They're not. Most of them are not provided by us, and the effort to do all that we're not undertaking. It's as if you came into our office like in the old days and wanted to see the file for a certain development. You'd get a big manila folder just chock full of paper, and you'd sort through it. This is hopefully easier than that, but you know, still might have a challenge in cases. But the beauty is you can get to it. You select that review letter, and depending on your system, it either will download it or open it in another browser window. So that is, and the other thing, this last thing I'll show you, because this also is, I think, really cool. There are two tools embedded with this. One is a land use filter. So if you just want to look at commercial, boom, there it is. And likewise, all the other general land use categories that we're familiar with are there. You want to dive into, you know, what's happening with multifamily activity, that's there too. That's the land use filter. We also have a search, data search, where you can isolate it to 1 year or a number of years if you're doing a, you know, an analysis, or just want to look at the last 2 years or the current year. Or you can actually specify dates. So if you want to just look at last month, what's happening in my community, it's there. You can also select by municipality and just show one of those. So a lot of things to play with and tool around with. This will replace, I think, you know, we've already put the summaries of development activity that we send to the board. We were used to send via email, and now it comes with the board packet, you know, highlighting some of the things. The link we used to have, if you wanted to access those plans, will be retired, and you can basically go here in that data search. You can enter the MCPC number and get to the same information that's there.
How many, are we unique in having this kind of resource?
We are not unique. We are late to the game in having a map. And you know, this started back when I was in county planning, and has been a process. However, I will say that the end result goes farther, and I think is more useful than any other in region that I've seen.
Yeah, I do a lot of work in Newcastle County, Delaware. They have a really robust GIS-based system that you can go in and look at every property. It's probably the most robust I've seen. And that has some value, but this is a super helpful tool to various sectors, you know, in the private and public market. So I certainly will be sharing this, you know, with clients and internally within our groups. But this is great, and a really nice addition to be able to get that information out there.
Yep, and we've just started to promote it. We haven't gone through all that. There's gonna be an email blast to all our contacts. And I'm gonna follow that up with municipal managers, just emphasizing, you know, any ways that they can promote it, because in the end, I think it may save them some headaches, and then all the people that come to your office wanting to know about a plan, you can now say, oh, if you want to see the plan or the details, it's on the county's website resource.
Does that have all of the plans or just up through what the planning commission has been tasked at doing for the project?
It has what was submitted
Up
after
to
the Act 47.
Okay, but so then a developer or somebody doesn't still know whether that project was ever completed or built as planned? You know,
Right.
so it got to this point here, but was it built as planned, or are there photos of it, or?
You wouldn't know that immediately. What you could, there's a base map button where you can open up imagery aerials, so you could see if it's a.
Is there a link to the community? You can actually
Yeah.
follow a link to get to the.
Yeah.
Not that I'm adding more work, but I'm just trying, you know, the complete, you know.
That's the difference, like with Newcastle County, Delaware, they are the recording body, and so all of the
Everything
detail
is
is
there.
there, and that doesn't apply here.
No.
So understanding the differences.
Because land use is controlled.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's really impressive.
We also control zoning and everything.
Correct, there is a
The
county,
county. so-
other than the cities that have their own.
That's crazy stuff.
Yeah, and our GIS section is obviously.
This is, and if you have a chance to show it to the county commissioners, I think this would be very interesting to them. Hopefully.
Anything else, Scott?
That's it.
Any other comments, any parting comments from board members? Okay, we're adjourned, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
That's really cool. That's really powerful.
Yeah, I think